Hello everyone, it's Oliver here and I'm back with Rob Hill for another audio commentary, and this time it's on Alien 3. Now this is the special edition cut, the one featuring the alien bursting out of an ox instead of a dog, just for those who need reminding. So Rob, are you excited to chat about Alien 3? Because I'm not sure, if you are a fan of this film.
To be honest, it's been really interesting going back and watching it again, because as I mentioned a minute ago, I probably haven't seen this movie in over 20 years. And I saw it obviously when it came out, big Alien fan, saw it when it came out in the theatres. I can't remember how old I was now, I was only sort of 15 or something. But watched it a few more times on DVD when it came out, on video when it came out and so on, and then just kind of forgot about it. And then when I went and did a couple of Alien videos a couple of years ago, I didn't rewatch it. I didn't really see it as it's not essential. People weren't ripping it off, were they? Let's be honest.
No, they weren't, no.
So I was really interested to go back to it and see what I made of it. And yeah, I've got opinions.
Okay. So everyone, you can enjoy this podcast by itself, but if you wish to sync up this commentary with your own copy of the film, put the timestamp to 0 on your Blu-ray or NTSC DVD and press play now. So as you were saying that you saw it at the time in theatres, right?
I did. I can't remember where or when, but I do remember seeing it on the big screen with Fred, and being really disappointed, basically, because to be fair, without David Fincher going on to become what he has gone on to become, I'm not sure we'd give it the second chance that we all do. Really, at the time, it was just, what the fuck is this? It's just awful.
Because it was. This was the first Alien film I saw. I was at the right age to be kind of aware of what was going on around me, because I would have been like 10 years old when this came out. So I hadn't seen Alien or Aliens, and this is the one that really was pushed with marketing quite heavily. So I was kind of desperate to see it, but I also had to wait till the following year, because, wait for it to be on VHS to rent. And I played the video game very much before the film, so I was very much kind of geared up to what Alien 3 would be, but the video game on the Sega Mega Drive and stuff was an all-out action game, but with Ripley with a bald head. So you're kind of like, oh, where's all the pulse rifles and smart guns, But I really enjoyed it for what it was, but because I hadn't had that experience of 1 and 2, I had no expectations other than the fact that, these bald guys on his prison were going to be chased by this alien and killed, and yeah, I didn't have that much of an issue with it. It was only kind of later on you kind of see the sort of the failings of the studio manipulating the film and changing it and not knowing what they wanted. David Fincher making a movie without a finished script, and this kind of mangled kind of edit what they released theatrically, even though it kind of made sense. You had characters sort of disappear and for no reason, and things didn't connect fully, but it was sort of a working picture with start, middle, and end. But it was when you see them all together, because this is way before Resurrection, the ending didn't really feel satisfying, despite the music doing all its best, to sort of make you feel that this is the finale, and it doesn't quite deliver. But what I loved about, especially how the film starts, is the 20th Century Fox logo, which has its own bespoke kind of theme of the fox with it, and that builds into this
it's
creepy.
It's kind of wrong footsy, doesn't it? It did me anyway, watching it last night. I had no memory of that, and it really starts you off on it, because it's a really ominous kind of. There's something slightly off about that fanfare.
Yeah,
it's not just that it's different, it's just a bit off, and it really puts you on the back foot straight away.
It's like, straight away you're in trouble, and because the happy ending of Aliens, is completely undone as soon as that Fox logo appears. This is not going to be a happy ride, and it still kind of bugs me that it doesn't really make sense how the alien egg got on there, because it's in an escape pod bit, right? Or it's part of the ship that then sets fire, then it sort of lets let out. But it didn't really. That was the only way they could explain it, by sort of fudging it in that way. Because we don't think the Queen would have laid one on the. She laid an egg. She would have laid an egg on the drop ship, right?
Yeah.
So it doesn't make sense. But anyway, we're there. But I think what was most fascinating about this, with many movies that are troubled productions, they often are. How they make it is actually end up more fascinating than the final result.
Yeah, this is a great example of that. Yeah.
Well, yeah, and that's what I love about the idea of how this movie kind of originated with this wooden planet by Vincent Ward. Had these monks and stuff who were living on this world they created, this kind of very Bosch looking movie with this cathedral like design and a world of very thin atmosphere where you've got these kind of fields outside which kind of would set up a wonderful chase sequence, and all these little bits he talked about. And now then Fox had agreed to it, then they changed their minds and wanted to be a bit more generic. It was, weirdly, it's this kind of idea of Fox wanting to play it safe, but also had put all their eggs in one basket, thinking this was going to be their big hit movie of 1992. And which is kind of weird, isn't it? Because Fox would generally have something that's kind of, okay, a PG-13 movie would be their big hit of 1992, not an 18-rated or hard R-rated film.
Without big names, frankly, apart from Sigourney Weaver, who, as a woman is never going to be the... that no one would normally hang their summer blockbuster on a female character who isn't even in an action movie anymore. But yeah, it's a perfect example of just wrong-headed thinking from the start. I think all the committee thinking, that's what led to the interesting ideas getting thrown out, like the planet with a 6-foot atmosphere. I don't know if that's ever been done before, but that's an amazing idea. The idea that if you could literally jump in the air and your head would be outside the atmosphere of your planet. The possibilities there are endless. And the wooden planet full of monks, which is a really striking idea, but at the end of the day makes absolutely no sense whatsoever, and it doesn't really belong in the Alien franchise, to my mind.
Yeah, I think because down to the fact that Alien 1 and 2, there's always kind of based around sort of physics and reality to a certain extent, where things were believable, how you flick this switch and do that, and the monitors, and how things, and a sort of, it wasn't clean like Star Trek, where you had this kind of sense of like it's too far in the future, where I think the idea of a wooden planet that has its at the core of it, this system that would keep them alive with this atmosphere, would seem too far in the future for after Aliens. You think maybe 1,000 years.
It's one of those things whereby in science fiction you can do what you want in science fiction, but you have to you don't have to obey the rules of science. You don't have to obey the rules of today, but you do have to obey the rules of the universe you create. And the universe was already created, and that universe does not feature a wooden planet, because a wooden planet is the stupidest idea anyone could ever have. It makes literally no sense. What substance is rarer in space than wood? But at the same time, it's a really cool idea and a really visual idea, and create a universe in which you say that makes sense and do it, by all means. But it doesn't follow James Cameron's Aliens, a bunch of monks on a wooden planet.
No, but if you go back and watch, well, I'm not sure if you've seen it, but Vincent Ward's previous film, it dealt with monks and things like that. So he's all clearly bringing over ideas he's already dealt with to repackage into Aliens.
Because he came up with the whole idea on a flight. He had this entire concept of his. He literally pulled it out of his arse on a plane.
Yeah.
And then got John Fasano to write it. I didn't realise that John Fasano, the guy who made Rock and Roll Nightmare, which is one of the most ridiculous movies you will ever see. John Fasano wrote that script. I mean, my God, he must have had a brief moment where people were taking him seriously and they jumped on him, but that didn't last long.
But you can see, like, during the course of this movie, where Vincent Ward's ideas are still kind of embedded in the film, because it's like he's still credited as, the story is his own, but it's like you can see some of the production design where you've got this kind of religious aspect. The guys are all religious as well. You have, where their clothes, how their clothes are hung. It's a bit like monks as well in the beginning with all the big coats on and the hoods. So you there is that sort of the building blocks of what he'd wanted is kind of there in structure, but it has become this just a prison planet, which I'm not that upset about if you look at the original concept and to this, but I think it does kind of reek of let's play it a bit safe, let's kind of keep it, I suppose, continuity wise with Aliens, because once you see like the mess hall or whatever, the kitchen, whatever it is, you've got that kind of similar sort of Hadley's Hope design to some of the rooms, so they are sort of carrying over some sort of elements of production look to this film.
I like the idea of the prison planet. I think is a great idea, and it's been done in a few movies. This is, believe it or not, probably the best of them. It's certainly better than Star Slammer. And it's a great idea, and it's a contained environment, which is crucial, I think, to Alien. And it's a contained environment that's completely different. It allows for a completely different set of characters, but they introduce these huge problems that they then have to deal with. And starting with, I don't know if we want to get into it already, but starting with the idea of killing Newt and Hicks straight away, for me, that's a disaster. That is just the worst idea ever. It's an absolute disaster. You can't start a movie by killing a 10-year-old girl you've already got a relationship with. Well, you can, but if you do, the only way to maintain any kind of emotional truth thereafter is to have the surviving character, Ripley, utterly broken, completely destroyed. I mean, that's something Ripley doesn't get over in real life. There is no way, to make her believable and have her get over that, which means that our protagonist for the entire movie is a miserable zombie. And that's just not fun to be around, especially when everyone else is some kind of religious lunatic or a British sex offender, which I mean, this movie is nothing but British rapists, American religious lunatics, and a depressed woman who's just lost all reason to live. And I don't want to spend 2.5 hours with those people. And that, for me, that's the whole problem with this movie, much more than anything else.
It starts out on the wrong foot, doesn't it?
Completely. They start out by creating a problem there's no getting around. And it didn't have to be like that. I completely get... Sigourney Weaver was apparently very keen to get back to being on her own, as it were. And whilst Cameron had mooted these ideas of... and told Carrie... Is it Carrie Henn who played Newt?
Henn, yeah.
It had told her as well that he was brewing these ideas about how Hicks and Ripley and Newt would return to Earth and be a family, and then they'd be... that's what Alien 3 would be. And I don't think that works either. I think that's a bad idea too. Sigourney Weaver has explained that she sees Ripley as a loner type, and I agree with that. I think that's the right way to do it. I think they did have to separate Ripley. I know Michael Biehn is really upset about not being cast in this, and in the documentary he makes a passing comment about how Sigourney Weaver may have been behind that. Wanting to... It's only subtle, but he makes it. And
he got paid more than Aliens just for them to use his face. The sort of digital little face they have very much in a theatrical cut to sort of condense this opening.
I think fundamentally they should have come up with a cleverer way of separating Ripley off, and they could have done. And indeed, the author of the novelisation did that. He kept Newt alive, but separated them. I don't know how he did it, but...
Well, we know there's other scripts, isn't there? Because during the sort of the genesis of this, I know, David Giler said they weren't really, desperate to make a sequel, but everyone wanted a sequel, and they didn't know where to go with it, because where would you go after the second one? And they had other directors involved. I know they had Rennie Harlin, who was very much wanted to do the world of the Aliens. He didn't want to be, but he found himself after a year not getting anywhere, because it was all just like kind of repeating what they've already explored in the first two. William Gibson's script, which was then turned into a radio drama a couple of years ago, which people seem to gush over. I think it was a terrible script. Well, it wasn't terrible. Terrible is a harsh word, but it just didn't do anything really exciting for me. And it does bring over, obviously, Newt and Hicks stay alive, but Ripley's in a coma for most of it, so she's out of the movie, and you've got like Bishop with like plastic knees and stuff. It made no sense. And like, and the aliens attack androids, and there's android hybrid aliens. I'm like, this is just insane. But they did do a radio drama. You can listen to it, Rob. But it's not great. Obviously, David Twohy, who did the Riddick films, he'd had a stab at it. But I think the idea, I think Vincent's one was the most interesting. But ultimately, what we're seeing is a watered down version of his script.
Yeah, or a combination.
A combination, yeah.
The Prison Planet was an idea early on. Was it Eric Red? I can't remember who came, or was it Giler who came up with it? I can't remember who came up with it. But yeah, it's an amalgamation, really, isn't it? They seem to have taken the worst aspects of all the possibilities and slammed them together, and then decided, actually, no, let's rewrite the script on a daily basis anyway.
Yeah. But if you look at the teaser trailer for Alien 3, it's really misleading, because it's going to say it's all set on Earth. You're like, well, wait a minute. That was obviously clearly done when they had no director or maybe a story set in stone, because it became this. What I think the problem was, the main topic of discussion was that they set a release date. That was it. It was all down to
Yeah,
marketing. We had to
exactly.
have this movie out in the summer of '92 or something. And the heads at Fox, I recall reading that maybe Rupert Murdoch had said, like, this has got to be the big movie of '92 or something like
Really.
that. Because he's head of the whole company, isn't he? I think of owning Fox. I don't know how much control he had over.
That would make. Do you know what? That would explain everything, because you know what these companies are like. If someone that important, if the president of the parent company said this is what's going to happen, you know all those executives are going to be running around in circles, trying to be seen to be doing good things, trying to hide the failures and the stupid ideas they're having, and that always just leads to chaos. Always, because suddenly everybody's got an opinion, and it's an opinion that they're going to potentially distort or change, or whatever, as it proves to be unpopular, or even completely deny. And it does seem like there were more producers, as far as I can tell, causing trouble on this movie than anything else I've dug into.
Yeah. I mean, it's the one producer that's interviewed quite a lot is Ezra. Oh, I've got his surname now. He's on here somewhere. Let's double check his surname. Is it pronounced Swedlow?
Yeah, something like, yes, yeah, it was, yeah.
Do apologise if I've mispronounced his surname.
I think he was basically their man on the ground, wasn't he? He was like Fox's man on the ground.
Basically, to make sure that he's not overspending. And Ezra admits that he was a very different person back then, but he does come across as quite level-headed and quite fair with his kind of putting his foot down with Fincher. But it's interesting that all the cast and a lot of the technical guys really liked Fincher. Also, Alex Thompson, the DP had constantly came in to replace the guy who had photographed Blade Runner, who clearly had Parkinson's. But he said, David was a little bit kind of short with him and not very communicative. But Alex Thompson, could photograph these large scale sets with ease. He'd photographed Excalibur and Ridley Scott's Legend. I mean, Legend is one of the most visually interesting films ever made. But it's interesting that the executive producers, head of production was John Landau, who's unfortunately passed away recently at the age of 63, and he looked. I saw recently like a sort of promotions for Avatar 2, and he looked a lot older than he should be. I was like, oh, he looks a bit unwell. Obviously, clearly was unwell. But he apparently, what Ezra said, was basically brought in to break David Fincher. In his vision for the movie. And if he doesn't, because basically the argument was, you're misspending our money, we're going to put our foot down. And John Landau was, a couple of years older than David? Maybe he's like 32, 33, where David Fincher was like 28 making this. 28! We're still doing YouTube videos at like 40s, But it's like, it's crazy how David managed to go up the ranks, he's a very talented guy, obviously from ILM, and did music videos, and they hired him to do this because of his music video talents, and obviously they can hire him on a cheaper fee, because
and presumably think they can push him about a bit as well. It's very much Marvel syndrome, isn't it? It's here's this guy who we reckon is going to be the next big thing. He's a creative genius. He's thinks outside the box. He does all these interesting things. Let's give him a franchise movie, and we give him the franchise movie, and then they do nothing but second guess, undermine, argue, and Fincher's whole line all along was quite understandably, like, you've hired me to make this movie, let me make it, or hire someone else. But that's just not how studios work, is it? And there's an extra problem here, because it's Alien, so it's a cash cow. There's a lot of people and a lot of money involved. But there's also a three-way dynamic, because you've got Brandywine, which is the production company, which is David Giler and Walter Hill, two men who do not take shit at all. And then you've got Fox, who's putting up all the money, and obviously it's their baby too. And then you've got David Fincher, and all three of them seem to be equally resentful of each other. There was no happy relationship there at all. And all three of them wanted to do something different. And I'm not sure any of them, including Fincher possibly, knew what it was that they wanted to do. They just knew what they didn't want to do, which is what everyone else was doing.
It was clear that David Fincher had, after this, had stopped talking about the film. He didn't want to talk about it. He disowned it in some way. But he has mentioned it a couple of times when people quiz him. He's also he said this kind of in London he was ritualistically sodomized by the English crew. And because he was told that these guys have made the other films before, they know what they're doing, you should hire them. But David couldn't hire who he wanted, his team. So that became the point where you got this young guy bossing around middle-aged men, older veterans, of what to do.
And if James Cameron can't pull that shit off, there's no way David Fincher's going to, let's be honest.
Yeah, and they become resentful. And you're making this film at Pinewood Studios during the winter. It's freezing cold, everyone's getting ill. And you've got all these problems where you haven't got a script finalised. Things are changing every day. I mean, I'm not surprised David Fincher just lashed out. And he does lash out. You see him in the making of. He's just like, Fox are idiots and things like that. You know,
That's amazing.
it's
isn't it?
great, isn't it? He doesn't give a shit. But David Fincher was already a wealthy guy before he made the film. 'Cause he had a production company making music videos. He was like loaded. So he didn't, I don't know, he didn't need the money to make this, you know, to be, you know, he didn't need it as a payday. He was just like, he loved Alien. I'm sure he had his sort of misgivings of Aliens and how it kind of changed things perhaps, or maybe set up these, you know, this family setting with Ripley, Hicks and Newt, and maybe he just wanted to squash that completely. We're going, she's going to be fucked straight away, you know, she's going to be screwed up, like, you know, without any sort of sense of hope to this movie. I think that's, I suppose people's reaction was it was not uplifting at all. It was a very depressing movie.
Exactly. And not just because you sense that everyone's doomed, and not just because it undoes the whole happy ending, or it undoes the entire point of Aliens, because Aliens is about saving Newt. That's what Aliens is about. At the end of the day, she's the only one who matters to anyone in that movie. Ripley doesn't Hicks doesn't give a shit. They're trying to save Newt. So to start by killing her undoes all of that. But then they're big enough problems in their own right. But then you assemble a cast without a single likeable character in it. No one you can root. There is nobody you can get behind or root for here. But Charles Dance here is as close as it comes, other than Ripley.
Well, yeah, I mean, Charles Dance is the best character for me in this film.
So of course he's killed first. I mean, this movie is extraordinary for that. You can literally, if you stack up all the characters in an order of how entertaining and great they are, that's the order in which they get killed as well, basically. Apart from David Webb, I suppose, who kind of comes into his own towards the end, finally, after just being really obnoxious the whole time.
Yes, and he survives, doesn't he, David Webb?
Yeah.
You know, which is great. I love always have the moat when they run into each other, him and the other prisoner. He's got the scissors the wrong way round.
Yes.
You fucking moron. And he's like, kill someone. You know, that's great little. I think there's little great bits of British humour in it, even though it's not written by any British people. I think there's kind of some sort of ad-libbing or sort of making up stuff along the way, perhaps.
Well, you can't not have British humour in it when you cast people like Brian Glover, and who is just talking British humour in my mind. That's all he is.
Yeah, I mean, fantastic. You know, in the episode of Bottom, you know, where he's still his gas. You know, but he was, again, like, because of David's problems, he kept them away from the cast and crew, but did confide in Brian Glover, who was like who's really helpful for David, and just kept his morale up. You know, I think it's other actors who had problems, like even directors, who had issues with producers, and if they're working with Jack Nicholson will defend you and support you. But, because he has the power to tell the producers to say no. Yeah,
exactly. Creatives are always going to stick together. Sigourney Weaver as well is full of praise for David Fincher and so on. And the creatives are always going to stick together against the producers at the end of the day.
Yeah. But it's Ezra, the exec producer, said he saw David Fincher on the phone with John Landau, and he hung up the phone and he got a knife and stabbed it into the table and just spread it across like that. And Ezra's like, oh, it's a nice table. And he says, David, I tend to like people at first. I don't go in with hating them straight away. Yeah. And David's like, I like people, but they stack well.
Yes.
Yeah. I thought, he's like, what a strange comment to say, But obviously, when they were sort of putting this film together, editorially, they said this sequence here was just the rough cut was just disgusting. With the autopsy of Newt.
Yeah. Yeah, I
The
mean,
makeup guy who's used to gore was like, oh, he couldn't stand it.
and why? But I mean, why did they want to do that? Well, I don't understand the appeal of. Maybe I'm getting soft in my old age, but I don't understand the need for. I mean, this is one of the first scenes in the movie, and it's Newt's autopsy. Why? We don't need that. We don't need to see that.
Yeah, I think she's just desperate to find out how, they all died. She didn't believe she had drowned. She's seen the marks, hasn't she? Or like he was checking for marks on her face, to see if there's an alien side. And we all know. I think a lot of people even knew. Actually, interesting. The magazine Cine Fantastique had done an article on this film. They covered it extensively. It was a whole issue, really, like so many pages dedicated to it. And obviously, Cinefex had done a big breakdown on the visual effects with Richard Edlund. But the Cine Fantastique article had basically spoiled the movie. They'd even reviewed the rough cut of it and talked about, and they mentioned Hicks wasn't in it and all this stuff, and people were furious that this magazine had basically spoilt it for everyone. But yeah, it's as I was it's interesting reading it now because in hindsight what happens, but at the time it must have been pretty disappointing. And so going in, I think a lot of people knew going in that Ripley was going to die.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember now.
See the guy in the background there with his with the ox. He's the guy from Batman. Beginning.
Yeah,
He's
the guy who Batman throws off the top. No, on top of the building, isn't it? Yeah, of course.
Where he goes, who are you?
Yeah,
I'm Batman.
Yeah, he's cropped up in so much. So I always think he'd be good to play Tom Waits in a biography.
Oh yeah, dude. He's also in Guardians of the Galaxy. I think was it the first one or the third?
He is,
no, I think it's the first one.
In a fanny suit.
Yeah, he goes in with the thing to try and sell it to him, doesn't he? Chris Pratt does. Yeah.
The cast of this movie is something else, isn't it? I mean, if for all of its problems, the actors they found to appear in it aren't really among them.
Well, we've got a David Fincher regular in this movie, haven't we? Know who it is? It's Holt
McElhaney.
McElhaney, yeah.
See, what David Fincher movies is he in then?
He's in a bunch. He's in Fight Club. He's in.
Oh God, he is, isn't he?
I think he's in The Game, isn't he?
Oh, I don't remember that one well enough.
He was in David Fincher's Mindhunter, which is an incredible show on Netflix, which they did 2 seasons of and they cancelled. I was like, fucking hell, it's one of the greatest shows ever made. Let me check. Oh, he's not in The Game. Okay, he's in a few Fincher flicks. He's a regular. He's but yeah, I mean, you've got like
he's a really, really good. One of my things to mention was going to be Holt McElhaney because I'm a massive fan, and he just doesn't seem to get the credit he deserves. He's so, and I didn't realise he was in this. I was like, I recognise that guy, but obviously, I picture him much older and kind of
he's very thin,
sturdier, shall we say?
Yeah. But you got Clive Mantle in this, who famous of Casualty, but was in, to me, he was in Superman 4 as the first nuclear man. But I spoke to Clive over 20 years ago, and I said to him, "What happened to you in Alien 3? You don't see him get killed." Because of the production, it basically halted at Pinewood, and they went over to do reshoots in LA because he wasn't invited back. They just kill him off by having him scream down like one of the corridors, when the alien's chasing all the prisoners. So yeah, he gets no death scene.
But I mean, yeah, it certainly for British television, anyone who's familiar with British television, that you're going to see a lot of people you grew up with ultimately, and like from Charles Dance, obviously the best thing in it really, but Brian Glover there is just so freaking good in everything he's ever done. And weirdly, I know him best from Porridge, where he's also a prisoner, although technically he's the warden here. But
well, to many kids, watching TV a lot, he was the voice of PG Tips, wasn't he?
Yeah.
And Tetley, was it Tetley? Was it Tetley? Yeah.
Tetley mix, tea bags mix, tea or something. Yeah.
yeah. And he was a wrestler, wasn't he? So.
He was a wrestler early in his career, yeah, and of course he's probably his most seminal performance is in Kes, isn't it? Ken Loach's Kes, but
to be kind of a big actor in this film, a big role for him. for people that many people hadn't seen before, he just smashes it out of the
Oh
park.
God, yeah, and he just comes on and plays Brian Glover too. This
Yeah.
is who he is in everything he does.
I love how just like he's very matter of fact. And he's arguing with someone. He goes, "Listen here, you piece of shit!" He just snaps.
He's perfect, like petty bureaucrat, middle management type. He really captures that. But Charles Dance, I can't believe David Fincher was absolutely determined to have Richard E. Grant in that role, which I remember reading about years ago, and obviously doing the research, gone back into that, and the feud he had with the studio over that, and I just can't see Richard E. Grant in that role. Can you? I love Richard E. Grant, but
well, if we had him and Paul McGann, it would be with Dale and I too.
And Ralph Brown.
Yeah, exactly.
This is it. I mean, this is when Ollie and I record these commentaries, we generally put a little poster behind us on Zoom relating to the movie, and I made a Withnail and I 2 poster, which is some artwork of Withnail and I with the alien attacking them, because it turns out that really is what David Fincher was going for as well, because he's a massive Withnail and I fan. So that's why he cast Paul McGann, who plays Marwood, and one of the main characters. That's why he cast Ralph Brown, who plays Danny the dealer, and that's why he wanted Richard E. Grant. I mean, there's only 4 actors basically in that movie, and he tried to cast 3 of them.
I mean, look at the dog alien, essentially. It's kind of like a Bambi alien, they called it, didn't they?
So is that a rod puppet or
It was, yeah. They've cleaned that up, I think.
Can't believe that's so effective.
Yeah, it's really good. And this shot here when she wipes off the moisture, the condensation, off the. Oh, that's the original photographer's work. Is it Jordan Cronenweth?
Yeah.
I'm getting names wrong today. So
Jordan something unpronounceable. I've always thought of him as.
But I think he had Parkinson's for a long time, but Ezra, the executive producer, turned up and goes, yeah, he's got Parkinson's, you can't, he has energy, he says, but he couldn't do certain things where a guy has to crawl into certain bits and measure the light and stuff. He just couldn't do that. But
you can't put a cinematographer with Parkinson's at the top of a ladder to check the light levels, can you?
No. So, I mean, I think Alex Thompson does a great job of sort of copying his style, and this stuff here in the kitchen, or the sort of the eating area, it feels like elements of Alien.
It really does, doesn't it? Yeah, I was just going to say that this, particularly the scenes shot in here, feels like Alien and Outland, which feels just like Alien to me as well. But this really reminds me of the cafeteria in Outland.
For sure. Yeah, Paul McGann.
But I mean, there's nothing wrong with the way it looks, is there? There's clearly sets are absolutely fantastic. I didn't realise till digging in research that they are all sets. I figured that at least some of it must be some horrendous foundry in the north somewhere that they found that's been abandoned since the, But no, it's all built.
It shows you though, like the first Alien, $8 million it cost. Also, we all know it was like 4 that it doubled due to Ridley Scott's fantastic storyboarding. Aliens, what 16 million, maybe a little bit more?
Yeah, something like that, wasn't it?
So then they've gone from that to 50 million.
Yeah.
For Alien 3. And that, I don't know if that accounts for the reshoots.
Well, 20 million of that they'd spent before they even started filming, didn't they? Because they'd spent 7 million on, according to the figures I've come across, they spent 7 million on sets for versions of the movie that were then abandoned, so the sets were just destroyed. And they spent 13 million, I read somewhere, on various script developments, which is easy to believe. If it's in, rolling over for several years, you've got all these big names coming and going. They're not working for nearly free. They're working, they're trying to get paid. So they potentially cost 20 million just to get the script that's utterly unintelligible and stupid. How badly can studios handle situations? And
I presume they're kind of shooting this late 1990 into 91 at Pinewood. So
it must have been, yeah.
You've got during a recession though, so the pound has dropped. So I imagine it was the dollar went quite far at that point. And Batman had just been made there at the same time. Well, about a year before. So that cost again a similar cost, 50 million.
But they weren't just shooting at Pinewood. They apparently had pretty much every stage at Pinewood taken over, and that costs more money than you can believe. I think if you want to hire out the whole of Pinewood, basically, you can't do that.
It's interesting when Aliens, where you got the British crew being difficult with Cameron. In the sort of making of on this film, it kind of seems that some were like fully on board with his direction and style, and others weren't. But it wasn't like he had the same thing as the tea lady causing problems, or people not wanting to watch his work to sort of justify why he's doing these things and what he's, how talented he is as a filmmaker. But it just seems more there's too many executives around trying to stop him misspending, but they don't know. It's like the argument. Richard Donner had said, like, despite the Soul Kinds being difficult and trying to stop him spending money, he said they had no vision for this film. They didn't know what it was, and he knew what it was. It was going to cost this amount. Where in this, I think the executives are just there to show that they are doing what they're doing, but also not actually understanding what he's trying to achieve with this.
Absolutely. There
you go. She's sitting right next to him. The Holt,
the Mac, the Big Mac. Charles S. Dutton as well. I mean, there's such talent in this movie. Pete frickin' Postlethwaite, who gets nothing to do. I don't remember that. I remember him having a lot more to do in this, but
yeah, he doesn't.
Charles S. Dutton's an interesting one, actually. I would love to know exactly what inspired and influenced that character, because it struck me watching it before, the glasses he wears are...
He's Malcolm X type character, isn't he?
But he's a religious leader, yeah. So the glasses there, first thing I thought, yeah, they're Malcolm X's glasses, and then I suddenly remembered, hang on, I picture someone else wearing those glasses, and it's Louis Farrakhan. So he didn't always wear those glasses. He's the leader of an Islamic organization in the States that back in the day, before 9/11 and before the whole war on Islam, back in the day was very popular with rappers and I think the African American community in general. It was basically an arm of Islam aimed at African American males. And Ice Cube was a member for many years, and a whole bunch of rappers were. But he's a very controversial figure, Louis Farrakhan, and I just noticed, and Charles S. Dutton has a vague look of him somewhere in a way that he doesn't of Malcolm X. He's not that sort of slender, tall. But
no.
It just made me wonder. What is the religion that they're meant to practice as well? Because it's never identified. It's never really explained.
Yeah, well, I suppose it's just, to me, I always just thought it as some sort of form of Christianity.
It's some form of Abrahamic faith. But there's nothing that points to Christianity specifically over Islam, and
that's the building blocks of Vincent Ward's. Like, it was a religious sect who had basically been, pushed off Earth. No one liked their views and opinions.
Exactly. Yeah.
So it's kind of this kind of generic religious cult, isn't it?
But what Fincher wants to say about that is potentially quite different to what Vincent Ward wanted to say about it, and it's just one of the many confusions of this film is that Fincher seems to be determined to say an awful lot about religion, and I've never quite been able to figure out what it is he's trying to say.
Yeah, it's all about having faith and being, a celibate as well, but also this trying to correct their past, isn't it? Because they're all like, as the Charles S. Dutton says, I'm a serial murderer and a rapist.
Yeah. So it seems to be an entirely selfish. I wonder if it's what he's saying is that religion can be used entirely selfishly, just for yourself to seek redemption, basically, and sort of be able to claim. Because he does say later on he doesn't care whether the alien gets back to Earth. He doesn't care what happens to everyone.
No,
he's extremely faithful, but he only cares about his little community of 25 people. He'll die for them, but he's not going to lift a finger to save the whole of planet Earth.
I did love this bit here when you see him cleaning it. He's screaming, and suddenly just You seem to just get cut up in a second. But the problem being with this film is that, I think David Giler put it quite nicely, was that it's not really scary.
Yes, that's on my list of problems with this movie. It is not remotely scary, ever.
It's a bit gross in places, and it looks, like a horror film should. It looks like greasy, muddy, and just nasty to look at. But it's not scary, and I don't think it really delivered on the genre expectations. We've got some, good editing going here. It gets diced, boom, and it cuts, but yeah, I was never scared by it. The first Alien will scare the shit out of you, and the second one was just like, just so intense. But this one doesn't have that intensity.
It's strange, isn't it? But it not only is it not a horror film, it isn't really a science fiction film in any interesting or meaningful way either, because it's they've almost deliberately created an environment where science fiction can't really play a role because it's so knackered and dilapidated and broken and nothing works. So there's no technology, there's no, they don't use technology in any kind of clever way to try and stay alive or to battle the alien. So it isn't sci-fi, it isn't horror, it's essentially a character study of a woman in breakdown almost, with this, with a monster running about in the background.
Yeah. It's got this science fiction type backdrop, but it doesn't. Yeah, as you say, it doesn't really deal with the genre. Yeah, it's kind of a sort of depressing drama.
Yeah,
but I'm saying that, like, it's depressing and stuff. I still find this film entertaining. I still like it. I think it's just down to the performances. The performances carry you through it, and that's why I think the film is so well cast. That I can sort of circumvent those kind of problems, but again, it's just how it was made. Sort of always kind of fascinates me, and it's the one that, because it came out when I was when I was fully aware when it was released and so forth. It was always be sort of fondness towards it, where the other two were just like, but you're too young, or maybe wasn't even born when it came out. So it's something of the past, where this felt very sort of modern.
Considering it was only, what was it, 6 years after Aliens came out?
Yes, you're correct. Yeah.
It does feel like a lot longer somehow when you look at it. The aesthetic, I don't know, that the finish, the look of everything feels, maybe because Aliens is kind of a secret low budget movie. I'm only slowly getting my head around it, because in my memory, in my mind, Aliens is this huge extravaganza. But the last few times I've watched it, I've really noticed how rough around the edges it is. And
he's got that sort of Roger Corman little bits to it, With this, I think that's just down to David Fincher, because he was doing such interesting music videos with Madonna, like the Vogue stuff. He was like one step of the curb, one step ahead of everyone. And seeing this is like what you'd probably see in the later part of the 90s, in terms of the progression of photography and style. And he's already doing it in 91. So he's like, that's what I've got him, because this is what the 90s is in terms of filmmaking.
That's it, isn't it? Yeah. I often find myself thinking, like, well, why hire a director based on their visuals alone? Hire someone who can actually direct actors and show them what good visuals look like. It's my simplistic way of looking at it. But you can't do that, can you? You've got to somehow have it in you. You've got to somehow have that eye that, that even someone like James Cameron might not have.
Yeah, for sure. It's interesting, when I was a kid and I was reading video game magazines on a regular basis, the writers reviewing the game would also comment on the film, and they say, it was a massive letdown, all this stuff, very much similar opinions to yours when you had originally seen it. So it was this, everyone watched it and come out going, no one felt upbeat, everyone was depressed and just sort of fed up, and just like, oh my god, that's the end of it, we're not getting any more Alien films, you know what I mean? So I suppose it would have felt like a huge downer for a whole fan base. Nothing was going to happen again.
I so clearly remember thinking what a strange film this was, because nothing really seemed to happen in it. And, I was too young to... I'd have been 14, I think. Okay, is it an 18 or a 15?
It was an 18.
It was an 18, so
and it's still an
my,
18.
My local cinema didn't give a shit about stuff like that.
Well, Rob, you are frightfully tall, probably when you were 15 or something. So, you know.
But I saw this with a couple of friends, and it was. Afterwards, it was just like it just left our minds completely, and I probably didn't think about it again until the video came out, and then was disappointed all over again.
I mean, I'm so happy they did actually release this, the additional footage, because for years on forums, late 90s, there was a VHS work print going around of Alien 3, which had a lot of these scenes in it, and some of those scenes in that extended cut on the work print aren't in this, because this is just a VHS copy of a print. And that was all the talk. It was like, oh my God, how do we get to see this? You can find it on archive.org, the work print. But seeing, Alien 3, and it's as close to David Fincher's kind of vision, or I think the script Charles de Lauzarica had kind of worked from. It made me appreciate the film more, I think, in its current state, in its extended cut. The theatrical cut I felt was, when you sort of compare the two, it's missing a lot of stuff. But there's stuff they left out of the theatrical cut, in this cut. So there's kind of, I think maybe for some fans there was still like a compromise between the two edits. Maybe some people would prefer to have the dog, because the dog kind of runs really fast, so that would symbolise the dog and not Knox. It's a very different beast, wouldn't it? It'd be a big fat thing when it comes out. It's like big lumbering around.
I feel like we over or a few people in the documentary anyway kind of apply more importance to the host creature than I do psychologically. Like I get that it's gonna absorb the DNA of its host, and that's going to be reflected in what it looks like and even its characteristics and so on. But I don't, I'm not. As far as I'm concerned, this could have come from an ox or a dog or any other four-legged animal. Really, it's not. It doesn't have to be that accurate. But the weird thing is that
flea.
It was, that would be interesting. The weird thing is that Fincher didn't like the ox scene either. Apparently, he preferred the dog scene. So they've taken the dog scene out and put the ox scene into the cut that isn't the director's cut, but that everyone tries to make out is the director's cut.
Yes, but then that keeps the continuity of the opening with the ox pulling the ship.
Yeah.
So in the theatrical, it's a big crane lifting it with a dog on board, and then you see shades of it. But earlier on, we got to see the ginormous facehugger, which is the super facehugger, which lays queen eggs. This sequence here, with all its faults, the dialogue is brilliant in this, I think, and it's really good writing of dialogue. I don't know if it's David Giler's stuff. He's because he rewrote some of it, the drafts.
Yeah.
And it's these little moments here between Charles Dance and Brian Glover, which I think are great.
And points to something else we haven't mentioned, which is very British, along with the humour of these actors. The reflection of the class system. That's something that I'd never noticed watching this before, but rewatching it again recently, that an understanding of the British class system explains everything you need to know about the relationship between these two characters. So that the warden, the one with authority, is profoundly working class. You might not pick up the accents or be familiar if you're not British, but this is as working class as you can get, Brian Glover. He is the poster boy for working class. Whereas Charles Dance has this incredibly, debonair, civilized, sort of classically upper class characteristics, and speaks in this beautiful received English and so on. So the needle between these two is entirely based on that, I think. Brian Glover feels a little inadequate, or a little, he's got a bit of a chip on his shoulder, basically.
Yeah, sees him as a threat in some way, but he's got one up on him because he knows his secret.
Yes, exactly. And doesn't he enjoy knowing that?
Oh yeah, exactly. I love the bit where he's let Ripley out wandering around, and he sort of berates him. You can't be walking around, these guys are hard on.
Not even looking at her throughout any of that. It's like he's so just resentful and disdainful of her very existence in his perfectly ordered little world. I mean, nothing could cock up this environment more than a woman being played. And that's something they don't do an awful lot with, I think. I mean, they do some stuff with it, but
I think the fortunate side of this is that they kill off the interesting characters too early, and they had loads of bald prisoners they could have used as bait.
Yeah, exactly.
You could have had Brian Glover hanging around, and so was Charles Dance to sort of, But but then if you take those two away, you got Charles S. Dutton, who again is incredible in this. So she does have someone to play off.
Yeah,
Sigourney Weaver does, and 85, and so forth. So, but I think it's just these kind of characters who are well written are sort of just taken out of the story too soon.
I've got a theory about because I can't figure out why Charles Dance needs to die so early. It doesn't make any sense to me. Maybe there's conceptual reasons I'm not grasping. But I've got a theory that, and it might not be very popular because it doesn't reflect very well on Sigourney Weaver, and everyone, including me, loves Sigourney Weaver. But the more I've read about her and seen people talk about her in documentaries and so on, I think she knows exactly how to play this fucking game, and she is brutal. She takes no fucking prisoners. There's the two big kerfuffles prior to making Aliens and this movie was her saying, no, I'm getting fucking paid. I'm getting paid a lot. Just to shave her hair, right? I want another 40 grand. She doesn't muck about. So she, like all actors. And all actors I've ever met are the same. They all have this insecurity. They all want to be the centre. They don't want to share their scenes. They want as many close-ups as they can get. They want to be the focus of everything. So Ralph Brown has talked in passing and implied, very vaguely and loosely, but I think very clearly implied, that his character was made stupid halfway through shooting. Possibly because he was becoming too sort of central. He was taking too much focus off Sigourney Weaver. So he needed to be made less sympathetic and less whatever. So potentially Sigourney Weaver may have said, I don't like how much attention this character's beginning to get in the script. I think we should do this. Because that's what he seems to think. And when you tie that in with what Michael Biehn says and what someone else said about him, from something to do with Gorillas on the Mist, I remember in a documentary years ago. But I'm just wondering if Charles Dance, she was a bit concerned Charles Dance was becoming too much of a main character, so let's kill him off.
Well, yeah, David Garland said, this guy was supposed to be written for some sort of for comedy, but Fincher was playing Ralph Brown as someone who's actually quite straight and quite kind of would have more of a role in the film. Yeah, but
he ended up with more of a role in it than was originally intended, I think. But yeah, I don't know There's Holt McElhaney's big moment.
Yeah, got to educate the brothers.
I mean, this is... I don't know why a scene like this needs to be in an Alien movie, if I'm honest. But
her attempt to be raped.
Yeah, well, maybe it's because I've spent the last few weeks watching nothing but barbarian movies, and I was kind of looking forward to something a bit less rapey, and then we watched this.
I did like Paul McGann just flying kick that vending machine. Like, which is good. See, this moment here, again, you've got a scene, which is basically like in Alien, where, what's his name? Oh, God. The guy who's the head of the ship on Alien. What's his name?
Dallas.
Yeah. So he's gone to the vents and to find the alien, and he's getting that beep, 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 beep sort of sound. And this is kind of, again, like an expansion of that, where they basically see something and they're running and it's going to chase them. And, but again, it's a bit gross where you just sort of see the head swing back and all this blood just goes on the guy's face. But again, it's not scary.
No, there's plenty of gore. There's plenty of blood. Yeah. There's violence. But yeah, it's not scary. I don't think David Fincher knew then. I mean, he must have known this was meant to be a horror movie, especially if he was a huge fan of the original. He must have been planning, hoping, intending to make a horror movie.
You got Terry Rawlings editing the film. He edited the first one, so Terry's not like inept when it comes to editing a scary
No,
scene,
no,
is
he
he?
is not.
So he's he's an absolute pro. He sadly passed away, which was a massive shame because I would have loved to interview him at some point. But but yeah, something's happened in doing the execution of this. I mean, if you watch like Zodiac, I think one of my favourite films by David Fincher, he creates some really tense moments in that.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, whether it's scary or not, he definitely knows tension. I mean, the game as well is it's almost a lesson in tension at times. And
Yeah. Also has a ludicrous plot though. It's so silly. The game has got a weird story, man. But it's kind of really interesting and just different. But yeah, there is something that's kind of gone wrong with this in terms of
maybe this is the time for my other unpopular opinion, which is that in a lot of ways and a lot of times this isn't a very well directed movie, and I wonder if David Fincher kind of lucked out a little bit in that he maybe didn't do the best job in some respects, and it's been kind of concealed or papered over by the fact that everything else is so shit and everyone hates it so much that he kind of got away with being a victim rather than a perpetrator of a crime there. But there is.
So what would you say are sort of the telltale signs of something that was badly directed in this? Outside of maybe where the horror isn't working.
It's so hard to pin these things down, isn't it? But I'm not talking about the choices, like stuff like killing Newt and getting rid of Charles Dance or whatever, but or the fact that it's so confused. But like you say, if you take an individual scene, there isn't a scene in this movie with any kind of sense of tension, to my mind, and there should be. Why isn't there? What? It's not the actors. It's, like you say, the editor or something. I think the score, by the way, which we haven't mentioned yet. I don't know what you make of it, but I freaking love the atmospheric side of it. I don't know about the themes. I didn't really notice them too much, to be honest. But the general sort of ambience is brilliant.
Yeah, I love. Yeah, I mean, Eric Goldenthal combines electronic with orchestral stuff, but also uses a lot of weird sort of percussive instruments to create sound effects, and that's where they had a major sort of argument about the sound levels of the sound effects and the music, because the music's also creating sound effects, and what would you then level out and balance with the sound effects? But yeah, I think this is probably the most lush score out of the three, because even at the end when she dies or sacrifices herself, it's a really emotional piece of music. I think it's a wonderful score. I've flip-flopped a lot on the scores. I mean, I still love Alien, because that theme, the thing, but this one, that intro music, the title theme, that sort of wow sort of synth, love that stuff. Really good. I think it's probably I think the score's doing a lot.
Yeah,
to save the movie,
because it, like you say, it kind of blends into the sound effects, and it at times becomes. I'm going to get this the wrong way around, aren't I? At times it becomes diegetic. I think that's the right way around. It sounds like it's crossing the line between whether or not this is meant to be a layer of music imposed from the outside for us to hear, or whether it's actually coming from the scene, whether it's actually within the context of the movie. It crosses that line and blurs it, and it's really freaking freaky at times as well. It's scarier than anything happening on screen in a way.
Well, that's what Jerry Goldsmith once said. Someone asked him and said, what if the film isn't doing its job? Because, I've got to do my job even more to make it work.
Maybe that's where this comes from, yeah. But just, what I was saying about the director, I just found my notes on it. I literally just wrote down very, very quickly a couple of thoughts I had. The pacing is weird as hell, I find. When there's something going on, there's a couple of long sequences in particular where the alien's running about and they're running about and stuff's happening and it's great. But when stuff isn't happening and it's a character scene, the pacing just never seems to be quite right. So it's never consistent. And it never engages. There's no energy. And it's not the actors are doing big performances and they're interesting performances and so on, but somehow they're doing it in a scene that doesn't have any energy. And it doesn't seem to have the right pace. There's no impact to it. It's a strange thing. And I don't care about them as well. I don't care about any of these characters, and I don't know why.
I wouldn't say I don't care about them. I So I was always, like I say, I was upset that Charles Dance dies. Brian Glover's taken out too early, and you become to appreciate some of the prisoners just down to the fact that one, they can be funny, and the performances are good, but it's a sense of like it's not the same effect where in Aliens I don't want Bill Paxton to die, I don't want Michael Biehn to die, I don't want Newt to die, Carrie Henn, sorry. So yeah, it's a different type of emotional connection, I think, with that. And and it should have. It's also hard to root for prisoners who are rapists.
Exactly, especially when they're not really given any kind of redemption. There's no redeeming arc really for anyone other than David Webb, who
who basically he's basically a Malvi guy in the background who then becomes more center stage, and he's seen to be quite caring towards Ripley near the end, where he knows something's going to happen, and when the company, that was their sort of, Carol said, the other producer of Brandywine, he's sort of, the idea of the third one was really about the duplicity of the company. Again, the company's only there in the background again as a way to sort of, they're introduced near the end because it takes X amount of weeks or days for them to travel across space. So they've already been alerted by Brian Glover, saying we've got these prisoners or whatever. But yeah, again, it's not really explored that much again with the company. They had the opportunity to, though, didn't they? So
this is it. If it's all about the duplicity of the company, then you need to do more than have one character talking about the duplicitousness of that company. It can't be about the duplicity of a company that isn't even featured until the last 10 minutes, that has no role to play until the last 10 minutes.
And their only motive is to make it a weapon. That is it. And I always think they felt a bit of a simple objective.
A simple objective that also doesn't really ring true, or in terms of providing motivation to Ripley, doesn't really ring true to my mind, because her whole motivation throughout the movie is we have to stop this alien from coming into the possession of Weyland-Yutani because they don't understand it. It will escape and it will kill everyone on Earth. That's what her concern is. She never talks about her concerns with regard to it being turned into some sort of bioweapon and used immorally by the company. She's talking about how if it gets to Earth, it will kill everybody. And why? I don't. How? I don't believe. How can we're talking about one alien being transported back,
which can be killed by a smart gun,
being transported back by people she's decided don't know anything about it and will underestimate it. She has no reason to know that. And I would have, fine, they're going to come, they're going to take it, they're going to put it on a ship in a big cage, they're going to take it back, they're going to sell it. I can't see how it's going to escape. But even if it does escape, a few people get killed and then it gets killed. What she's talking about. So the alien queen has to escape, then it has to find and create a nest, then it has to lay its eggs without anyone ever finding it. Somehow it has to, without any of its minions to serve it and keep it alive, it has to stay alive laying eggs whilst it's nailed to. It just isn't a threat. It's not a threat that I'm worried about as a citizen of this planet. Yet the entire plot revolves around Ripley preferring to die than allow that to happen, and expecting all these prisoners to be of the same mind.
But it's kind of like this scene here where she's telling Brian Glover about what she's encountered, and the trailer line, "You have no weapons of any kind," which is used in every TV spot, But his attitude is just like what someone would probably say, just to sort of like, it's got acid for blood and it's quite nasty and all this stuff, Why should I believe you?
If I was Brian Glover, I wouldn't do anything Ripley says at any point in this movie. This facility is enormous. There's all kinds of places you can hide from it. There's all kinds of places it can be trapped. Do that. Fine. They trap it, and then another plot point I can't stand.
Paul McGann.
That is so. right, we've got it trapped now, and we need to set it free for the movie to carry on. So how do we do that? Well, we'll just have a loony guy let it out. It's so lazy and stupid.
Well, that's why David Fincher cut it out apparently, and they put it back in for this because it basically has Paul McGann disappear from the film. If that,
yeah, he's one of the characters who just disappears.
It was in the continuity, is in the theatrical cut is kind of, a mess.
But David Giler makes a really good point as well, saying he hated that scene where they trap it because it makes the alien less threatening. It makes it less intimidating if you present it as a thing that can be caught. And I'm with Giler on this. It not only does it make it it emphasises the fact there's just one of it. It's not as stupid as some animals, but it's still pretty stupid, frankly. And it can be outwitted, it can be trapped. It's this easy to gain an advantage over it. I think that does devalue its threat to some degree.
Yeah, I mean, well, what Terry Rawlings said was like, yeah, it showed you that they could trap it, but it's going to escape. Thus, it gives like tension to it. I believe.
You know it's going to escape, but that makes sense. But it doesn't undo the fact that it devalues the threat, and it doesn't excuse the fact that the method they use to have it escape is stupid.
Well, they do imply that Paul McGann's character is a nutter, so for him to switch and sort of let it go would make sense for the objective of what you'll do. But and also because everyone's all been manipulated to be very religious to believe in this particular way of thinking, you're going to get nutters at the core of it, really. It's unfortunate here again is where Charles Dance is going to die, and it's kind of cut a bit short, like because we see the behind the scenes, it's a lot more grotesque. Maybe it's actually kind of wise to sort of just give you flashes of what it does to him, because you see it, the mouthpiece penetrates his skull, like, doesn't it? And they just gets dropped, and you see the alien kind of. It's weird with the effects in this. Richard Edlund's company Boss Film had also, we get to see it when it's running around his kind of rod puppet. Blue screen rod puppet, and you've got Tom Woodruff in a suit, but there's also elements with the optical stuff where you see it in a minute where she goes up against a wall and the alien comes towards her. The scaling perspective of it's not right.
Yeah.
And then it gets really close to it, and it's got the trailer shot, isn't it? Where just the bitch is back, and you see it obviously recognises that she's got an alien inside of her. But people, it's so funny, like. When I've posted stuff on socials about Alien 3, people say, oh, the CGI in the film's terrible. I'm like, there isn't any CGI. There's actually one CG shot.
Yeah.
Where you see the skull go, like, crack about to break because of from hot to cold, whatever.
I was going to ask you about this, actually, because, so watching that documentary, which is the first time I've seen, again, the documentary in 20-some years, whenever it was made, actually, that... They were really bigging up the rod puppet thing, and I just watched the movie and I was thinking, but what about the CG then? They're really implying that there's no CG in it, and surely there's two shots in particular I can think of. I'm thinking that is classic early 90s shit CG. It has to be. But then doing more and more research, either they've really buried the fact that it is, or it is all rod puppets. So the alien is. I know the shot you mean that is CG with it when it cracks. The cranium gets the cold water on it and it cracks the side. But there's like a bunch of shots when they're running about in the corridors later on where
it's on the ceiling.
Yeah, it's on the ceiling, and it gets to the door, and it gets the door slammed in its face a couple of times. And I would have bet money that those were CG, not because they don't look like rod puppets, but because it's lit so horribly. It's exactly that early 90s CG, which they still do it now. They just can't help but overlight it, and it just looks wrong.
I think it's bad optical effects. I think.
Yeah.
They have confirmed that there's only one effects shot that had CG. But there's a couple of shots where the rod puppet works really well, but others where you can kind of see the limitations of the optical process of doing that. Because I had this weird Laserdisc playback for capturing the footage. It was very strange. I don't know. It didn't really make sense to me. That's a good setup though, when it's in the bed and it sort of the weight of it goes through the mattress, and then suddenly, boom, grabs him.
Oh, so he is tied up there, isn't he? Oh, he talks his way out of the thing, doesn't he? I remember now.
So this bit here, when she approaches her, you kind of got the scaling's off.
So how can that not be CG? That one shot then of it,
No,
it really looks like CG to me.
Yeah, it's a puppet. Yeah.
But it's the.
I don't think it would have had the compositing.
The compositing is key, isn't it? Yeah.
Wouldn't have, the compositing. I don't think the compositing would have been CG at that point.
No.
It'd still been optical.
Yeah.
Because this is getting done at like 91. I think the later stage of 91. Because remember, this was a year in editing. Them trying to salvage the film, It says Terry Rawlings. It was crazy, like too long. This moment here where she's running down the corridor, you've got the sound of the score, which is making all these banging metal. That also her running footsteps and touching stuff. You've got this kind of cacophony of noise,
I love it. I absolutely
I love
that.
it. But it also shows you the nightmare of balancing what is sound effects and what is music.
So it's another Tom Waits reference, really, because it does at times. It really does sound like some of Tom Waits' more extreme or experimental stuff.
Get this raving woman back to the infirmary, and just grabs him. It's like, I love it. And it's just like, was it Darren? You say Darren Webb, wasn't it? Who's the guy, the swearing guy who survives?
Oh God, not Darren. Oh God, what is it? Danny Webb.
Danny Webb, yeah. We're just like, fuck.
What do I know him from? I can't work out. I feel like I know him really well, but I can't see what it is when I look at his.
He's in Valkyrie. He's in the Robin Hood film that competed with Prince of Thieves.
I feel like it's a TV show because
he's in Plebs. He's in Plebs. That's a good TV show. He's in a lot of stuff, man. Loads of stuff.
I think
it's mostly TV. It's a lot of TV. And the same thing with Clive Mantle. A lot of TV of their career. He's a TV guy generally.
Yeah, Brian Glover as well. Yeah, and Paul McGann, Ralph Brett. Yeah.
Yeah, Paul McGann is like, weirdly played Doctor Who once, but probably still the longest standing Doctor Who by having to do all the radio stuff, right?
Good point, yeah.
I remember seeing that episode of Doctor Who when it showed it on BBC One for the first time. I was like, this is weird.
It's the least surprising grab from above ever in any movie, I think. That's everything. The way he's talking, the position of the camera.
I love when he's cleaning it. He's looking up. You know what I mean? I love that. You'd do that. No way would I go in there, It's interesting. It actually show you the sort of... Because wouldn't the alien itself make a nest to hide, you know what I mean? And take its victims, but you don't see any of that.
Yeah, it doesn't really have the characteristics of the alien, does it? And it's... Because it's... Also, it's just it seems like it just wants to kill everyone. It doesn't seem like its objective here is reproduction and finding a safe nest and all this
just
stuff
food.
that it should be. It just wants everyone dead.
Yeah. Very shallow objective, isn't it? For the alien.
See, it all comes alive again. It's been alive again for a little while now. The energy is somehow in it, and everything's working.
Well, the energy comes from them because Sigourney's got no energy, is she? Not on purpose to say, I'm not bothered to do this, but she's just basically got she feels like she's got a horrible cold.
Exactly. Yeah, you can't. This goes back to my fundamental problem with this movie. Is you've got a choice. You can either keep the emotional truth and have Ripley a character you just don't want to spend time with, or if you're going to kill everyone off, you've got to figure out a way of maybe you skip on a year and she's got, I don't know what you do, but you this isn't the character that you want to spend time with, to my mind.
Well, it's interesting with Ripley, in the first, she's often come across as a very transparent character, She's not one to hold information back. You know what I mean? In this, she's held information back from Charles. And well, she only told Brian Glover down to the fact that he's in control, to sort of, you know, for her own well-being. But now she's actually being, okay, right, I'm going to tell you what the problem is. But she's still not giving them everything information.
No, and she's not doing it to try and create tension and to try and create drama. And so there's no... Because she doesn't have to say, there's an alien on my ship and it impregnates you with and it does this and it does this and it does. It can just be a wild animal or something. You know, it's so frustrating when Charles Dance... You know, when she's close with Charles Dance and he's asking and she knows all this stuff and it's just fucking tell him. Just tell him there is something dangerous on it and we need to be aware of it. We need to be looking out for it. We need to be looking out for signs of it.
But maybe it's just down to the fact that she is in, like, she's got this thing inside her. She feels like shit. And she's just like, I can't be bothered. You know, I can't be bothered to tell you everything. I haven't got the time. Just one of those days, isn't it? You know.
It's funny. I don't know if you. I can't remember where I came across this particular nugget, but apparently David Giler, in his various battles with Fincher in the studio, apparently Fincher put the phone down on him and said, "That's what happens when you listen to a fucking shoe salesman," because of his Nike adverts. It's like.
Oh, I love David Giler. He was a shame he passed away.
Yeah,
you know, he's like the best out of all those documentaries. You know, having him, because he's just so, like, couldn't give a shit.
He just says what he thinks, doesn't he?
That's what I love about him. Yeah. But it's also, you know, we talked about earlier on with our, you know, especially your disappointment at the time, but also audiences with finding out that Hicks and Newt had been killed off so somewhat very carelessly. And, you know, to show that they just didn't care about these characters. We're just going to have this kind of horrible situation straight away into the movie. But also, decades later, we had audiences had the same thing with Prometheus, where they got us to invest in Elizabeth Shaw, great actress, great performance. And then come Alien Covenant, she's gone. She's dead. You know... You only find out what really kind of happened to her through a little tiny flashback in the film, but also just as a prologue trailer they put out that was directed by Ridley Scott's son, where they're on board the ship and they're trying to she's fixing David, and what else was there? Some other little tidbits before they arrive on the you know, the engineer's planet. So that was just released as a trailer. It wasn't part of the movie. So if you hadn't seen that trailer, you just go straight into Alien Covenant. She's dead. She's gone. And it's like, wait a minute. That's what James Cameron was, like, annoyed again, really, because he'd invested in Elizabeth Shaw and she's gone in the next film. So yeah, it kind of happened again. It's just like, I don't know what they're doing with sort of, like, they just want you to, they get you to invest in the character, and then they're like, well, you can't be invested that much. We're just going to kill her off and then introduce a new set of characters. And I don't know.
It's kind of insulting, really. They think that we can be played like a violin, and it's
Learn from mistakes, guys. You know. I mean, the new Alien film Romulus is coming out soon. I've just dated this commentary, but you know, they'll probably get us to invest in a character we really like in this, and then they do a sequel, and they're dead. You're like, oh.
Charles S. Dutton does look kind of intimidating as well, doesn't he? You can believe that in fact, he was a convict, wasn't he? Did you know his history?
He had done prison time, hadn't he?
Yeah, he did. If memory serves, he did. He was jailed for manslaughter, but then got into a fight with a prison guard or something, and got like a really long extended sentence, much longer than the original one. So I remember
he served 7 years.
Is that right? Yeah.
But then he went back into prison for 3 years for having a possession of a deadly weapon.
Right.
Which could have been like a broadsword or something. A mace.
He's one of those prisoners who sort of finds themselves inside, and I think he discovered acting inside, didn't he? And then dedicated himself to it afterwards.
That's why he's so like just hench and brutal in this. You know what I mean? He's just probably calling on his past or something. I don't know.
Well,
but he's like, you know, when he says, you know, the F word, you know, he means it in this, doesn't he? But we had, you know, behind the scenes, like Stephen Norrington working on this.
Really?
You know, he worked on Split Second. You know, he worked on this.
The effects?
Yeah. Just helping design some of the aliens and stuff, to you know, touching them up and, you know, correcting things, I believe. Yeah.
What do you make of this the alien design in this? I mean, we've mentioned that it's four-legged and but
I don't mind it. I mean, it's just basically a taller version of what we've seen from Aliens, and it's kind of like orangey blacks and, you know, kind of gungy looking. It's but it's very different to what Giger had designed for this film. You know, he goes, it's very erotic. He's got these lips and
oh god, yeah. I've had enough of H.R. Giger talking about eroticism while referencing his own mouth. I do.
These big tubes, and you know, and I like it's very cat-like, wasn't it? Like a, you know, like you say, like a jaguar, I suppose, wasn't it? With the model maquette, the guy had designed for Giger, like his assistant, and it had these like claws, like that come up, or kind of come out of its hands.
Yeah, swords.
So it could climb things really quickly, and but weird having human lips though. That was kind of like the weirdest part. It's bordering on, I suppose, the creature he would design for Species.
Yeah,
in that regard, somewhat sexualized it a little bit with the third one, but this one basically kind of looks a bit like the arms and legs are a bit longer. It still just kind of looks like a xenomorph in its normal form, really.
Most of the shot, like that shot we just got of it, then could have been anything. I really like the way, or the extent to which we actually see it moving, even though it is so often unconvincing and just looks like terrible CG, even though it's not. One of the only flaws, one of the only criticisms that you can make of the first two movies is that you don't see a lot of the beast in long shots, especially, moving about, if any. So I really like seeing it get up and about, and that first shot of the Bambi burster, they call it, and that's completely convincing to me. I think that looks brilliant. I love that. I really like the idea behind it and everything, and I really appreciate the fact that they've gone back to Giger's original smooth cranium concept as well, you know, away from Cameron's variation, and that they hired Giger to design it, even though they completely ignored his design, which, to be honest, wasn't one of his best. I mean, his work on the first one was months and months spent in LA and wherever. On this, it's like it was a few sketches that he faxed through from his house in Switzerland.
Well, he had a picture. He had sketched the ox, didn't he? Which was interesting. But I don't think he'd designed a super face hugger. I think it was just like, we need a new alien that's kind of, it's come from an ox, basically, but had the speed and agility, and he's just done what he'd thought it would be. But I think those designs were even for the Vincent Ward version. Because he said the Vincent Ward had a great idea where these guys were on the toilet.
Yeah,
and it would come up and just pull you, which he said was also funny but also terrifying at the same time. I thought that would be great, because you're always like, if you see any horror film where something comes out the toilet, then you go for a dump afterwards. You're like, you're a bit cautious, you know.
I think that's a terrible idea, personally. And the producer who explained in the clip I saw, I can't remember where I saw it when, but the producer saying it's brilliant because it's scary and funny. And I just said, no. This is how movies go wrong. A producer decides that something can be simultaneously scary and funny. And it's possible, but not in what you're imagining is not both simultaneously scary and funny.
There's only one director who can do that, though.
Roger Corman.
Funny and scary. No, Rob. It's Sam Raimi. You know.
Oh, good point. Yeah.
He's the only one who can do it.
Yeah.
Get away with it.
See that? How is that not CG? It's
And
extraordinary.
that's yes. That's a rod puppet, isn't it? Yeah.
So it is. It's the oh
That's a
God.
rod. That's a complete rod puppet there.
It looks so much like bad CG, badly comped.
Oh, it gets worse later on. But it's no. See, the problem being is like with the comping of the optical effects, right? The alien is not like transparent or it's like lost color. It still retains the color in the optical, so it hasn't like got that generation loss. It's just got a matte line all the way around it.
It is such an art comping. I mean, we've talked about this before, but what people might not realise, and I think it's still the same now, is that to create a CG monster in a scene like that, more time will be spent on the 2D, which is the comping, than on the 3D. So the CG monster needs to be created. It'll have a whole lighting guy come in, a surfaces guy, and all these people. But to then put it in the scene is so much more work, and so much more goes into that than might be obvious. Because if you just because they obviously had this, so they shot the monster as a rod puppet against blue screens, and they shot clean plates on the set. And they use some sort of primitive version of motion control, by the sounds of things, to marry the two up and stick them together. And it looks to me like that's what they've done. They've just stuck them together. And there's so much more goes into it than just placing that thing on that thing. The rotoing, the finite little different, the blurring of the edges, just all kinds of little touches that suddenly make it look convincing. They're just not been done here.
No. There's a couple of bits where, when you see the alien kind of run, chasing someone, the guy comes up into the foreground and shuts the door.
Yeah.
It's really good comping on that. It sells it really well. It's just like, I think it's just down to the angle you're shooting it from and the sort of the complexity of what the alien's doing. Because if it lingers on too long, that shot, it gives it away.
Yeah.
And I think that shot we saw, it hangs on it too long.
And it's not lit right either. And that scene there is a prime example, because there's all this fire around. And looked in detail, I dare say they've done something clever to try and reflect that fire in the surface of the monster. But whatever it is they did wasn't working for me. You also see it as it walks off. I only just noticed this time, as it runs off, it can't decide whether it's in front of or behind a bit of flame at one point.
Yeah. Love to be with Neil. And I... Do you want some more? No, I'm space. Not space as your rodents. Always kills me.
If I spike you, you'll know you've been spoken to. I kept doing this all the way through watching this last night. Every time Paul McGann or Ralph Brown came up, I was like, speed is like a transatlantic voyage.
Does this gaff have a dog? No. What are you talking about? I love this bit, because let me go. Goes, oh, sorry. Like that. It's such a great little line. And then he clumps him with the fire extinguisher.
And what he's doing with his accent here, I have no idea.
Well, Paul, didn't he? Paul got told off his accent he had used earlier. Then he basically becomes someone from Liverpool, I think. Here's what he felt it sounded like.
Selling hippie wigs in Woolworths, man. Sorry. Can't watch someone fiddling with their hair and not say that. Do they have any scenes together? They just one-on-one. They don't, do they? That'd have been cool. I'd have had to have shot something and slipped in a little reference with those two together.
That would have been good.
They were going to make a cartoon series of this. Kenner had signed a deal for a toy line and a corresponding...
They did. Yeah, I had the toys, Rob. I had the toys.
No way.
They didn't make the cartoon. They made the toys.
I didn't know
though.
they made the toys.
Yeah, that's well. If you put in Kenner commercial aliens,
Jesus Christ.
The advert just goes aliens, and then you got all these clips of people like going, "It's over there," and then it cuts to like the action figures and then people pretending to be those action figures. You know what I mean? There's like recreated like this new alien thing, and oh man, you had this gorilla alien and one with like flying wings. But you had like Bishop, who had like a chain gun. It was so weird. And like Ripley had a power loader toy. Oh, I loved all that shit, man. But yeah, it's a shame they didn't actually make the cartoon, because I would have liked to have seen that as a kid.
God, it just...
You would have been well annoyed when it came out. You'd been too old for it, you know.
Kids need a toy range based on a movie about a monster killing rapists. That's what they need.
Yeah, it's crazy, isn't it? Because even like kids' TV shows, like they talk like there's one called Bad Influence, and Violet Berlin and Andy Peters, Andy Davis. I can't remember his name now. They talked about technology, and his kid would go to ILM, and they were showing him how the effects were done on Terminator 2, a movie that was rated 15 or 18 in the UK, and it's a kids' TV show, so it's kind of this weird thing where they already knew kids would have seen Terminator 2, but even though it's not for them. And you know, as we saw with video games, you know, that were based on violent movies that kids loved. Those RoboCop toys, you know what I mean? It's like, you know, surprised they didn't have like action figures of Peter Weller's hand getting blown off or something. I don't know, but
yeah. That would be awesome. Yeah, removable or a hand that you can kind of ping off
Pops
and
off.
explodes into 100 pieces. But at least those are movies like Terminator 2. Fine, it's not. Some people would say it's not child appropriate. I don't think there's anything in Terminator 2 that's inappropriate for children to see personally, but maybe that's why my children are insane. But the thing is, it's not that like most of those movies, RoboCop is inappropriate for children, but kids would fucking love it. This is inappropriate for children, but it's also not appropriate. Like I wouldn't show this to my kids for any number of reasons, but the main one would be that they're just not going to like it. They're not going to enjoy it. It's not the kind of movie kids like. You know, Aliens is, RoboCop is, Predator is, you know, the other things they've made toys for, but...
At the time, this had... I think really what Kate spun out of this in terms of merchandise was like model kits, really, and that you can make of the Alien and the yes, is it Sulaco? Yeah, what was that? Yeah, the ship. I got my friend a model kit of that for his birthday. I always like to get him because he's obsessed with this film, so I try and get him like original stuff from the time. But there wasn't much in terms of like, they didn't do any action figures, but I think later on companies would license just the Alien 3 kind of creature, right? You wouldn't get an action figure of Charles S. Dutton, you know what I mean? Or like,
Rapist number 2, one of the lesser characters.
I want a Paul McGann action figure. Come on. There probably is. There's a Doctor Who, isn't there? So they've made him a figure.
I want a diorama of Holt McElhaney bending Sigourney Weaver over a pole. whilst Charles S. Dutton beats a prisoner to death with a metal pole in the background.
It's like Blue Peter trying to make the Thunderbird base. But okay, this week we're going to be making a diorama set from Alien 3 where Ripley's about to get bum silly. You know?
This week's scene is Newt's autopsy.
Don't forget to bring some sticky back plastic, you know. He's got a pretty cushy prison cell, hasn't he, really?
I quite like the idea of this place, to be honest. There's no technology.
I'll happily live there. Look at that set. It's amazing. It's very Victorian, isn't it?
I keep thinking it. Again, when I watched this last night, I hadn't reminded myself, or I didn't know that all of this was set. And watching it again now, I keep on nearly saying, Jesus Christ, they built that. They actually built that. They didn't find some old gasworks or something.
No. This is Norman Reynolds, you know, who built this set and stuff. Fucking great! I love it because Danny Webb comes in, he goes, yeah, it's gone. You know, he sort of looks like it's not my fault, but...
What, do we get any kind of explanation for his arc? Because he's the character who changes, isn't he? But I think it's Danny Webb. I think I was calling him David Webb earlier, but someone Webb. He's the one who starts off as this and ends up as this. But is there any real reason for that evolution? Does Ripley's humanity, which he isn't really displaying a lot of, frankly. Does that rub off on him? Is that the idea?
Yeah, because only Charles Dutton really has sympathy for her, and Ralph Brown's character. Because when she does to do the X-ray, and it's like, oh, you got one of the things inside of you, you know. I mean, and he admits, oh, you know, you're a nice person, but you know,
that's interesting. He shows more sort of empathy in that scene than Charles Dance does in the beginning when I love that scene when he tells Ripley that Newt's dead. He's doing a hell of a lot of work in that scene, Charles Dance, and it's a beautiful little performance. But it's obviously like it sort of betrays the extent to which he's hardened himself, or had to harden himself to not care. So he just sort of tells her she's dead. Whereas, yeah,
she didn't survive.
She didn't survive.
You know,
sorry, yeah. And then, again, Ralph Brown in that scene again does a lot of work to really get the nuance right, the way he handles that.
I think he has a wife and kids to go home to.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
so he's not, you know, a criminal. He's a normal guy who's not particularly bright. But I think that's what comes. His humanity sort of shines through more to support her. But yeah, with Danny Webb, you know, he's just a guy with a horrendous temper. But I think again, he's there to sort of, well, he realises his own safety and he has to basically survive, and he realises that Ripley knows what she's doing, so he's just going to follow orders, isn't he? You know, step in line. You know,
I guess, yeah. I suppose
yeah, that's kind of like take away from it in the sort of simplest terms. You know.
That is actually a good reason to get rid of Brian Glover as well. What you say about 85 here about Ralph Brown's character with Brian Glover in the movie. There's no room for him to sort of come to the fore. Really, is there? He's going to kind of have to remain trapped as the sidekick who repeats everything that Brian Glover says. It's not until he's out of the picture that 85 here has got the room to grow into a different person and to be given things to do like this scene.
Well, yeah, I suppose it's down to the fact that he, you know, his character hasn't been given an opportunity to do anything, and now he has. He's not actually that stupid, you know. He's just the caring person,
lacking confidence, probably.
Yeah. That's what's derived from his low IQ, I suppose, maybe.
Well, he smoked a lot of weed, so
yeah.
Those Camberwell carrots, they'll knock your IQ down.
Yeah, and they bring back the character for Wayne's World too, don't they?
Yes, yeah.
Had to beat him to death with their own shoes. 3,000 brown M&Ms. He would go on stage.
I've forgotten all about that.
Oh, I need to watch that film again. Because apparently the face you see, the mould of the head, is actually Glenn Close.
Oh yeah. Well, was it Meryl Streep or
Meryl Streep?
I think. Yeah,
maybe Meryl Streep. Yeah, had used her as a sort of for the mould and put the face hugger on and stuff.
Because that's another weird thing. They keep talking in the documentary about how they didn't have this, they didn't have this. They found a mould of Carrie Henn's body or head or something that was left over from. Like it sounds like, although it had a budget bigger than all the previous Alien movies times two, they seem to have been quite short on certain resources. And
maybe these things just weren't kept, you know, for them to reuse certain bits. But I mean, I know there was a double for Newt because there's behind the scenes footage of the girl waiting to get inside the hypersleep bit. But there's obviously, because when you see Newt looks like she's basically drowning, that's obviously must be the head replica they had of her.
Of course, yeah.
Maybe,
yeah.
I don't know.
But I mean, why not cast a Sigourney Weaver's head and use that in a scene like this rather than just finding another head they had lying about?
Well, I suppose they probably knew that they would do a cast of her later on to do the bald cap with all the hair in, which a guy spent a week doing, for it cost a fortune, but it was cheaper than actually getting her to shave her head again. But that's when they did a mould of her head. But at the time, maybe they just thought, well, you're not going to see the face.
I guess, yeah. I guess.
It's just time, isn't it? Fucking air conditioning. Why does all sit there with axes when it comes in? Just hack it a bit. Just wait, you know.
it is funny how Pete Postlethwaite just has nothing to do, does he? He's just, I don't. In fact, does he do anything?
He only basically just
Shuts a
closes
door.
shuts a few doors, and just like complains. This is her idea. And he's like, and I think something like, it's behind us or something like that. He says, but he doesn't have much to say. I think Clive Mantle gets more to say than Pete Postlethwaite.
Would this have been before
He's like,
Usual?
He's an amazing actor.
That was Usual Suspects.
That's like 95.
Okay, right, because that's what broke him in the States, isn't it? I think.
And you got the chef in there who's completely useless, isn't he? Who basically starts the pistons, whatever, starts the process too early, doesn't he?
Of course, I'd forgotten about him, yeah.
He's just like Matt Lucas, isn't he, a little bit?
He's in Father Ted, isn't he, as well, that guy?
Henry
Sellers in Father Ted. It is. I can understand audiences struggling to tell people apart. It's getting easier as there are fewer and fewer of them, but there was a lot of complaints when, I think, especially outside of the UK, obviously. You've got everyone looks the same and everyone sounds the same because the nuances of the accents are going to be lost outside this country.
Yeah. And the film, the film was seen as sort of a disappointment for the US domestic box office, but it did extremely well worldwide. It's just based on the IP of Aliens.
It made as much money. They all made, the first three all made about the same amount of money, I think, didn't? Or the first four even, maybe.
Yeah.
Internationally.
It's just big worldwide. Even though, somewhat domestically, it may not perform as well. And this always goes down to the argument, wasn't it? When there's always, when you hear these debates now with female characters in movies, protagonists being like too strong, or all people can make references to now when it comes to comparing female characters in new movies to old movies, they always bring up Linda Hamilton, Sigourney Weaver, and that's all they can think of.
I thought you were going to add a third the way you were saying, but no, you're not allowed to add a third. There's only those two.
Because they don't know anything else. I mean, you've got other great performances like Gina Davis.
I was going to say Long Kiss Goodnight came a few years later.
Yeah, but that's 96, right? But then you got, in that period, also you got Michelle Yeoh and things like that.
They're talking about American movies. They're always these generalizations. They're talking about American movies.
But weirdly, because David Gardner said women weren't going to watch these movies, even though you got like this female kind of hero at the centre of it all, who all the men loved, but the women didn't give a shit. They didn't care. They weren't going there in droves.
It's another perfect example of how insulting producers can be in their thinking. It's like, well, how do we get women to an action movie? Well, we make a woman the action star. Well, that's kind of missing the point.
Yeah. It's just weird, isn't it? But it's also, there is other strong female characters in the 80s outside of Sigourney Weaver and Linda Hamilton. You've got Helen Slater.
Yeah. That would be an interesting. Yeah, I must admit, I'm struggling to think of anyone who you'd put. We're talking about strong female characters in male-centric movies as well. At the end of the day, we're very much judging this from the perspective of male action fans, as everyone who has that conversation does.
Yeah, it's like, I can think of a couple. Cherry 2000.
Cynthia Rothrock.
Tina Turner.
Yeah, I think you had actresses like Meryl Streep who were actually doing pretty well for female characters in the 80s. They just weren't in action movies.
Yeah, Glenn Close, she's terrifying. Fatal Attraction.
Oh, that's true.
No. He's getting an email.
What are you going to do with that, Danny?
I think that's roll a spliff, I think.
I recommend you smoke some more grass.
You are high. it will settle. You know, so
Change down. Find your neutral space. You got a rush. It'll pass. Be seated. I've seen that movie a lot of times.
Oh dear.
Maybe we should start doing commentaries on the Withnail and I cinematic universe next. That would be interesting.
Sure. For sure. I hope that doesn't involve Hudson Hawk. This is quite clever here with this moment here, because she goes in to find the alien because she knows it will be nearby her to protect her. But you see those pipes, and you think it's there. It tricks you with the eye that the alien's just sitting there, but it's actually right above her, you know. But I think she implied this might be where the alien's nest is. I'm sure there's some sort of line about it, but I'm not entirely sure. But you'd start seeing, if it was done in a way like the hives we've seen in, especially Aliens, where it's just this kind of like, you know, gross, slimy stuff, you know. But you don't see any of that. They've got plenty of spiders there, though. Lots of cobwebs.
Yeah.
How do spiders get there?
I was just thinking the same thing. They went through a whole thing when some big spaceships went there. There's going to be aliens. That's fine. That's how spiders get there. But then I started thinking, well, hang on. There need to be flies then as well, don't there? And there are lice. So yeah, there must be a complete ecosystem of horrible bugs.
And you got to shave all your body parts. You've got to be smooth all over. Make you incredibly itchy.
It's beautifully atmospheric at times.
All this stuff is amazing here. Love all the background stuff, because this feels like what we've seen in the previous movies. The background, we've got that sort of retrofitted stuff. It's kind of exposed in terms of the cabling and wires, you know.
This could be on the Nostromo, or it could be anywhere in this universe, really.
Is it loads of cockroaches burst out of it, isn't it, or something?
Yeah, so what's she... Yeah. Didn't we just saw the alien, though, didn't we?
No. Well, no, that was a trick of the eye.
Oh, that was the trick of the eye. Oh, okay.
Yeah. Well, actually, it probably was to trick the person, but then just to set up the illusion that it is.
Yeah.
But that's actually above her.
This is a nice idea, though. Impregnating. I do think all that works really well, actually, as an idea. Having her impregnated, even though I've no idea how it happened. It doesn't... I mean, how has she got a thing inside her?
It's loosely set up at the beginning, isn't it? That it is set on the ship, and it lets loose, and it cracks the glass to get to her face. But also, there's a burning on the side of the hypersleep that sets off the fire alarm. Thus, they are ejected from the Sulaco.
So was that? I thought that was Newt's their sleep chamber. So that was Ripley's sleep chamber with where you see the burn mark, right? And so then it's just part of the whole.
It's all set up because when the camera pans out, like you can see her like awake slightly because there's a crack near her mouth, so it's already told you that. So
we accept that it just somehow got on that escape.
Yeah, I mean, like it made no sense. It made no sense
because it's the whole life cycle thing of the alien it's brilliant that they clearly they just make it up and do whatever they want and then say, oh well, there's a difference.
Also, the Queen rips the sort of sack, doesn't she, as she escapes to chase after Ripley and Newt, right? So she clearly just pumped out an egg, just went and hoofed it, and it got stuck somewhere, you know, for the facehugger to escape, you know, because it doesn't make any sense, but it had to do that as a way to continue this.
But it's the gestation period, isn't it? So then presumably...
Well, for her, because in what we see in the movies is that when they are impregnated, it happens relatively quickly, right? Over space. You know, with this hers has been delayed because Charles Dance had been given her medication, hadn't he? to
true,
combat
yeah.
her sickness. So that's kind of delayed the effect.
So we're saying
But
that's right.
maybe because it's a queen as well, it takes longer to develop.
That's that makes okay, yeah. No, all these things.
As a monkey in there picking skin off another monkey's back, just like
There is a fairly nebulous mythology though surrounding this creature, that like why they looked at it. It seems to me that they just do whatever they want, and whatever serves the plot or whatever serves the ideas they want to have, they then retro engineer like the whole thing the reason that they look different in Aliens is because Cameron just thought, I think they look better like this. So then they have to invent an explanation as to why.
Because there's no groundwork for the lore, right? It's all kind of up in the air, and that was sort of the riding factor in people's annoyance with Alien Covenant, was because David had become the creator of the alien, and there's no process in that of the Queen. How does the Queen fit into all this? So that kind of undoes what we thought, how the biological way of the alien kind of operated and how it kind of created itself, all things, the sort of genesis of it all was kind of undone. And now everyone really pissed off. But then these rules haven't been set in stone. It's just like, it must made logical sense that there was a queen.
Yeah.
And it was like a hive, but then Ridley Scott kind of changed all that. But then again, a queen could still be derived from this kind of process of what David's done, but it just wasn't shown or mentioned. But there was things like insects on the wall he'd drawn and stuff, so maybe that was the kind of loose connection to that. But Ripley's got to do a big speech now, hasn't she, to encourage everyone to, like, basically, because at 85 just like, they're not going to kill us, they're not going to hurt us because we know. She's like, of course they will. They don't care about you. Why would they care about a bunch of prisoners on a planet? You know what I mean?
That's another, I suppose. Weyland-Yutani again. It's one of those things that it's never really explained, and we're just trying to piece it together. But it struck me that it's a hell of a coincidence that unless Weyland-Yutani is just the future of everything, in the future, Earth is essentially just run by Weyland-Yutani, because they've randomly left one Weyland-Yutani facility and then randomly crash landed on another one to avoid introducing a third party.
Did Ridley Scott, they sort of said, like, or maybe someone else maybe who's connected to these films, like, on Earth it's basically like Blade Runner.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you've got what was the company in Blade Runner?
Tyrell, yeah. But that was just one of many corporations, though.
Yes, true, yeah. Because they didn't have much full power to sort of keep the replicants going, because they were kind of stopped, weren't they? They were kind of by another authority. So
it's a minor point. It's
interestingly though, the promotional stuff for Alien 3, there was a Pepsi tie-in, right? These kids are walking down the street, it's a Pepsi machine and are chased by an alien, right? But you just saw 85 Ralph Brown holding a Coca-Cola bottle. Why would they get a last-minute endorsement for Pepsi, but Coca-Cola's in the movie?
Maybe Coca-Cola, like Kenner, saw the finished product and just went, I don't really want anything to do with that, thanks.
I would love the McDonald's tie-in with Alien 3. That would be so good. Get the rapist burger now, Double quarter pounder serial killer meal, action figure with Charles Dutton with an axe.
I really want a Charles Dutton action figure now.
Definitely, man.
Him and Brian Glover.
Like Boss. Oh man, yeah. and you can press a button and they talk. Right? Yeah. Charles Dutton's like, motherfucker. It's like, and Brian Glover's like, get back to the infirmary.
I mean, all credit to Sigourney Weaver and for David Fincher for having the balls to do it, to carry this through this whole miserable Ripley persona that I
We think
can't
David
believe
Fincher's
they stick
idea
to
to
it.
make her bald,
I
wasn't
know,
it?
I love that. I mean, that's when Well, according to Sigourney Weaver anyway, she's probably rounding off the edges a bit, but it was allegedly David Fincher's suggestion that she shave her head that got her really really pumped for this and pumped for him.
Well, it's just like, she goes, "How do you see Ripley in this film?" He goes, "I don't know,
Bald.
bald."
Again, this is a movie made. Everything has just been pulled out of someone's ass in this movie. Nothing's been thought through, I don't think. Because, I mean, the whole religion aspect is left over from the Vincent Ward script, isn't it? I think
Yes.
basically it's that idea transposed to the prison setting of the previous script.
Because the original ending was far better in Vincent Ward's, where that you've got the giant field they've created,
Yeah.
and she walks into the fire.
I prefer
Because
this.
it was supposed
to be
it's supposed to be a scene where it's very what you'd see in the Lost World, where the raptors are going through the wheat field or something like the high sort of grass, and you can see him coming in, and that would do that with the Alien. You can see it from above shooting down with these guys getting chased. I mean, that was a great kind of setup. Where what we're about to see now is the chase through the corridors. And Alex Thompson, the DP, said, it's all great when they, the Steadicam operator flips the camera, which you'd never seen before. But, the sort of geography of the whole thing makes no sense.
Yeah, we're rapidly coming up to my last major complaint of the movie, actually, with regards to everything you just said. Yeah, and it's also another Alien movie that ends with the alien chasing people through corridors. So yeah, the idea of what you just described about the wheat field, a scene like that, brilliant. Love the idea of that, because it's taking the alien out of the environment, out of the only environments we've ever seen it in at that point, and doing something different, because it is, these sort of dark, dank complexes chasing people around that's both the previous Alien movies. But the idea of Ripley walking into the flames didn't grab me hugely, and I do really like the idea. I love the idea of the ending of this, of Ripley sacrificing herself in that way, throwing herself into that. It's incredibly cinematic, or it would be if they hadn't fucked up the effect so badly. And especially, I love the idea of it's a bit cheesy, but I love the original idea of the previous cut idea of the alien bursting out as she's jumping and so on. But it is ultimately a lot of people running about in corridors coming up.
What they could have done, actually, what no one's thought about, is like, well, they were outside earlier. Why don't they all go to the front door, let themselves out, lock it, and then the alien's stuck in there?
Yeah. That's what I was saying earlier, that there's endless options for them to separate themselves from the alien and be perfectly safe. The only reason they have to engage it is because Ripley has decided that it can't be sent back to Earth, and they've decided to somehow, for some reason, believe her. So it feels really over-engineered, creating a situation whereby they have to actually tackle the alien and can't just hide from it, because there's clearly places they can hide here. They don't even have to go outside. But if you're going to have this is another one of those shots that has to be shit CG.
It's not CG.
How cool would it have been to go back at, because that environment we see at the beginning is freaking awesome out on the beach. It looks so cool.
There's weird kind of like columns and stuff.
Yeah,
it's kind of like a shipping bay, kind of like, isn't it? There's a shot coming up here where you see it run, chase the guy, and you can close the door behind it. I think that's the most effective shot of the rod puppet design.
I remember this being a big deal. I can't remember if it was the trailers or TV spots or something, but I remember there being a lot of shots of this, the Steadicam charging down the corridors, which was really striking at the time. You didn't, you've
never seen a Steadicam do that before.
It's like now when you'll see an incredible CG monster and it just doesn't touch the side, you don't notice it. But there was a time when that would have been really impressive, but overuse, and this is exactly the same deal. But they managed to overdo it in the space of one movie. There's a few shots like that, brilliant. By my reckoning, there's far too many of them, and I can't abide this upside down and on the walls thing because it doesn't make any sense. Oh yeah,
that's the shot I love. Yeah, that's one. Yeah.
How does the alien run on the ceiling? How do they can't defy gravity? Every time it leaves the ground to bound, it's gonna fall down. It's going to need constant bits to grip onto, which you frequently see there aren't. And then the camera, when the camera switches back to the right way up, it's clearly exactly how you would rotate a camera, and nothing like what an alien would do as it leapt from the ceiling down to the ground and flipped around.
It would be just kind of weird.
Yeah, it would be it'd be much faster.
Yeah.
It would kind of zoom down and then thump as it hits the ground. There'll be a sudden start. It's clearly just a camera rotating, and it really takes me out of it.
But I suppose it was just done because it looked cool. That's the thing. Looks interesting. That's why they've done it. I think it's just like done at literally on the fly, wasn't it? Oh, let's do that. Look at that matte painting. The matte paintings in this film are fucking stunning.
Cool are the matte paintings.
Oh man. Because they were coming up now, isn't it, with some of the really bad comping of... It's generally one where the alien's on the ceiling.
But how does an alien run on that ceiling there? I don't get it.
Yeah. It's the comping here. It's just like...
It looked blurred then as well. It looked out of focus.
There is this kind of like... you can tell it's raw puppet because of how it kind of like weird... stiffness to the animation. It's getting more like it's not smooth. So this is all like as Alex Thompson said, very confusing.
Yeah,
you don't know the layout of it. So.
You never get any kind of sense of the geography of this location, of this building, this series of buildings.
And then when you see it there, when you close the door, it starts running like this. It looks very thin and just like weird angle. But when you see Tom Woodruff in it, it's big and imposing. Yeah. You know what I mean? It's just
the scale's completely wrong. And yeah, also limbs do seem to vary in how sort of sturdy they are. And there are a few shots now where the tail's been kind of... That just doesn't look like the thing we just watched getting trapped outside that door.
Yeah, it just goes... like this.
But there are shots when it whips its tail. There are shots where the tail sort of appears to almost disappear in places, and it's whenever there's really fast movement. I suspect someone either hasn't rotoed it, or they've over rotoed it, or something, and it's not consistent rotoing.
Because near the end, when they're trapped in the furnace bit, and it's like a very tight space, and he's got the tail whipping out. It's a massive. It's like all practical, isn't it? So it's all in camera. So it just looks bigger and more threatening. The stuff behind him now, like when it's beat behind Pete Postlethwaite, and that's a good take. But again, it's all nicely shot, but it's just like not scary. That's the frustrating element of this movie. I mean, I think it's only really an 18 because of the foul language. I think really, and that's kind of its tone. This is not a not for 15-year-olds or whatever. 13-year-olds.
To be honest, I'd show. I haven't shown either of my kids the first Alien yet, but I'd probably show them that before this, even though it's infinitely scarier. Just because I think they'll enjoy it more. I don't know what there is for. Unless you're an Alien fanatic, I don't know what there is to enjoy in this movie, really.
Well, my joy comes from it, but down to the characters, the music, and its visual style. And I think I can, you can say those elements are good for one to enjoy it. But I think in terms of like the satisfaction of seeing someone triumph over adversity is kind of a bit all skewed in this, and it's like, and you've got a hero at the center of it, surrounded by nasty people who you come to appreciate and like because of their because they're funny or they just got good dialogue. and they also, they're trying to, I suppose, sort of redeem themselves in some way to protect, because they use themselves as bait. You know what I mean? But again, they're doing it for their own survival, not just hers. So I don't know. The sort of the tone and the morals of this movie are a bit messy.
Yeah,
perhaps,
yeah.
you know?
There's such a great opportunity for redemptive story arcs here, and I don't feel like any of them are done well, frankly.
Dylan's gets some redemption, doesn't he? You think?
Which one's Danny Webb?
Charles Dutton.
Charles Dutton.
Charles Dutton. Yeah.
I don't know. I guess. I mean, he softens a bit, but I don't see what it is that happens that makes him do that.
Well, because he knows, he's in his mind that he is safe because he believes he's going to be in the afterlife he'll be fine, right? Because because he will sacrifice himself to protect her.
In which case, is it a sacrifice?
Well, I don't know. I mean, you see it. I suppose I see it that way because it's like, I don't know. Maybe that's what the movie wants you to think. That guy seems like he belongs in a Carry On. Hey, fuckface. You know.
See, this I like this. See, I mean, there's, like I say, I think there's far too much of this Steadicam in the corridors bit, but there's an energy to all this stuff.
This is good editing here, and the music's kicking in. He's like, "Run as fast as you fucking can," and this time you just see him get hit, and the body just goes. It's all a bit confusing. What actually
I know. I've
there.
Never understood that.
Yeah. He just like randomly explodes. You see some legs flying around.
That was one of those. Like, we know the effect we want to achieve at the end of this little sequence, but I've got no idea how we're going to do it. We'll just do it. It'll be fine.
We got the Japanese turn up now, don't we? Because they're I suppose they're the Utani.
They'll be the Utani. Yeah, very subtly done.
Yeah. Where is Ripley? She's like, he's got these wicked glasses on. Like, boom.
I mean, that is how Japanese people will dress in the future as well. I can believe that.
Oh, mate. Oh, yes. Exactly. It's like, oh, this is clearly not Lance Henriksen in the background. It's like, oh, I love this.
Brilliant,
Fucking scare big shitless.
It's great. And he wasn't even carrying scissors this time.
This film needed Richie and Eddie in it. Rick Mail and Aid Edmondson.
Everything
so
is Rick Mail and Aid Edmondson in. I just did a podcast a few days ago, and it's funny all the connections that keep coming up on Mr. Jolly Lives Next Door.
I've never seen that.
Oh man, it's bottom for grown-ups basically.
Oh, amazing! I'll have to watch that then.
It is such a great plot device. Making, I started to say this earlier, but I think we moved on. Making Ripley untouchable is such a great plot device.
She's got to try and drag it. She grabs its tail, I think, doesn't she?
Get off, Mum.
Didn't she, like, I think it's like one of you said, like, Tom Woodruff had like an earpiece in and Dave Fincher was behind the set just shouting abuse, like, you fucking hate her, kill her, just like, trying to make Tom hate her. It's a shame that H.R. Giger had fell out with the guys at Studio ADI because I think they were invited to go see him and his designs and stuff, and they just couldn't down to the time. But because he then left the project Giger had, and he wasn't happy with what they'd done with his design, that offer to see him had now closed, and they're sort of a bit like, a bit upset by that, It's interesting because it's Giger's design, but you saw with the sequels where Studio ADI, Tom Woodruff and Alec Guinness would essentially be the guys who would create
Yeah.
the Alien from then on, and then they would do things for the AVP films and things
And
like
that's
that.
the way it
and,
should be done, really, because an artist like Giger isn't going to, isn't going to be constrained by practical realities or think about how you're going to film this thing or how you're going to build it or how you're going to put someone in sight. How you're going to make it needs, it's the way it was done in the original film is kind of perfect. He has the idea, and then it's kind of made. He's involved enough with practical people to be part of making it practical after that. But even then, it's still a bit limited in what they can do with it because of the design. So to have him design it and then have practical people adapt and build it is probably the best of both worlds.
Well, yeah. Well, I'll say there wasn't a complaint, or I was disappointed in a way, because we saw Giger do other designs. He was brought into Prometheus to do some stuff, but it was too late, and what he designed was a little bit weird. And because you go through his book, there's stuff in there that you couldn't put in Alien. It wouldn't make sense. It's just kind of like there's only a few pieces they'd chosen to then incorporate into the film. Well, another thing was because I had mentioned it during the Terminator 2 commentary, that the endings are very similar, because at the time, when this was 91, they were doing this sequence, and they'd heard, this T2 hadn't come out yet, but they heard the ending in a furnace, and Arnold sacrificing himself. So like, oh God, what are we going to do? Because and it still got criticised for being very similar, but because they had to, that's why they incorporated the chest burster, was to say it was different. But Dave Fincher didn't want to do that. He didn't want to do the chest burster, and that's what we see in this cut. You see a very crappy effect they did for this edit of her just like her arms spread out, this cardboard cutout going into the fire. It's not very good. But the theatrical cut, when you see the chest burst and you still see her falling, it's awful flickering effect.
Yeah,
it's like it's been comped on video.
I don't remember I didn't realise that they'd only done the one without the chest burster, later in the day. But it's the first time I'd seen that version. How can both versions of a fairly simple effects shot look so terrible?
Yeah, it was bad, really bad. This is all pickups. This is all stuff in LA.
Yeah, and of course, it makes sense then that Fincher's preferred version would be the one without the chest burst coming out. But I think that adds a line. It's a great touch having it come out of her as she falls.
Well, she's still going to die anyways. It's just to show that she's cradled it and like it's her baby, basically.
And I think maybe part of you wants confirmation that it's in her as well. It's funny, isn't it? That the Alien movies are such a great example of a series where all the ideas came from different places.
That, when it jumps out there, the molten stuff looked like it was CG, but we're only told it's only this bit coming up when they drop the sprinklers, isn't it? This goes.
That's what they claim.
Cracks. That's it.
But I never believe them when they say there's no effects, no VFX, there's no CG.
It's in Cinefex. They talk about that. There's a great book actually on Cinefex. Put all the Alien issues into one big book when Alien 3 came out. You can get it on like eBay for like £20. It's worth seeking out for those listeners who want to know more about the effects.
Yeah, I think I said this in the commentary for the first Alien. It's really intriguing with this series how the idea, and it carries on with this movie, with the third one, how all the ideas come from different places. There's no one author, there's no one creator. Like, people I think like to think of Dan O'Bannon as the creator of Alien, because he's a bit weird and he's obviously a creative and he's kind of a victim, and we just like the idea, I think, of one person coming up with an idea. But all the ideas came from all over the place, and Alien did such a great job of picking all the best ones and putting them together, whereas this seems to it doesn't exactly do the opposite. It doesn't pick all the worst ideas, but it's got producers written all over it. That shot, I didn't know this, that shot of the definitive shot from this movie of the face-to-face between Sigourney Weaver and the alien, I didn't realise that the studio told him not to shoot that.
Really?
They said you can't. They said you can't shoot that. It's not in the budget. It's not in the time, or something like that. So after everyone else had gone home, he just got Sigourney Weaver and the cameraman and basically a skeleton crew and just did it anyway. And it's like, Jesus Christ. So it didn't...
Because they'd said, during the reshoots, like Terry Rawlings said, okay, we need, and Ian and Dave Fincher decided, okay, what we need to fill the gaps, we need A, B, C, E, and F, right? And then they go, oh, you can only have like B, E, and F, right? And then they shoot it, put it in the film, and then they watch it and go, oh yeah, you're missing bits. Yeah, because we needed those bits. So there's constant back and forth, constant meetings, arguing. It's just like, Jesus, guys, just let them finish it, you know.
And someone with a bit more experience than David Fincher would probably have handled that situation a bit better, because it's like, I think they even say in the documentary, we need these 5 scenes, and the producers would say, well, you can have these 2. And an experienced filmmaker they're just going to go and film those 2 scenes, knowing full well that when they go back, the producer's going to yeah. Or they're going to film them in such a way that it requires the corresponding scenes to be shot. These clever filmmakers do it. There are certain filmmakers who only shoot.
Will do that.
Yeah.
You like things like, oh, I need a crowd of 1,000 people, but you really want 500. Right, so you lie to them, and they'll give you 500, what you want, because they think,
you've got
oh,
to
we're
work
going
the
to cut,
system,
you know.
which David Fincher didn't appear to be doing at all, as far as I can gather, which is understandable. He's young.
I think it just needed a really strong line producer that was going to assist him and had the experience. I don't know. It just seems to me, and my impression you get from the documentary is just like you got guys there who very much enjoy the power they have, and aren't fully experienced in this type of production, and are just basically just like, oh, you can't do that, you can't spend any more money. And I'm more sympathetic towards Ezra, the producer, and Dave and John Landau, who was just like, if you see in the interviews, he's very cagey about what he did, and he's like trying to be sympathetic, but you just think, I bet he was a right
exactly.
monster.
Yeah, there was clearly engineering going on behind the scenes. There was a lot of politics. I think there's a lot of this person's been imposed by the studio and is reporting back to them behind the director's back. I think there was a lot of that kind of thing.
That was the awful thing when Fincher would come in and say, talk to the effects guys, and then say, give them some advice, and he'd walk off, and this woman who's an assistant for the studio saying, you can't do that. Once David's left the room, it's like, fucking hell.
Exactly, yeah. And you've got to play that. You've got to be smart to get around that. And David Fincher obviously just didn't have the experience. Like Werner Herzog says this: if he doesn't have final cut in the days when he might not have final cut, and he wasn't quite sure about the producer, he wouldn't shoot 5 frames more than he had in his screenplay, because he knew if he did, it was just giving the producer an opportunity to do something different. To use that take instead, or to extend that take a bit longer, or whatever. So he'd end up like with 5% of what he shot not being in the actual movie, just to make sure that no one could fuck with his vision. And this is obviously the exact opposite of that. You've got Fincher doing 15, 30 takes apparently of everything, shooting all kinds of different versions and interpretations of everything, and that just gave the studio all the material they needed to do what they wanted.
Well, yeah, because they said he was a slow shooter, wasn't he? And he still is, I think, isn't he? He does like a lot of takes.
This is weird. So this is the human Bishop, isn't it?
Well, he claims he created.
Yeah, but look at, but his whole
his ears come off.
So like that's all right. That's just what humans do, is it?
The music here is just beautiful, absolutely beautiful score. But then AVP, it makes Bishop is then based on what Wayland looked like in his image, which is Prometheus changes all that. You know, Wayland is Guy Pearce.
Yeah, so it's pretty much each movie, certainly beyond the second one, has its own mythology.
Yeah, it really does. He's like, "What are you doing?" No,
it looks like like you don't have flat. I don't understand how his ear it looks like that unless he's an android.
It gave him a really big ear. Oh, it's just a crappy effect. They've tried to.
It's so bad, isn't it?
But it's bad in the theatrical cut.
And then The worst bit is the actual impact, which isn't an impact. She just kind of gets faded out. They just turn the opacity down on the top level, and
I've seen better effects in Superman 4.
steady on.
Steady on. Don't go that far.
There wasn't a blue glow all around her.
Oh, Chris Reeve's frozen still as he moves off camera. So there's the religious symbol there in the kitchen. You can see that sort of, crucifix thing. I love this bit here where he just heads on Danny Webb. He just gets pushed forward. He's like, fuck you. The final word in the film is fuck you. Or something, I think it is. The final word is fuck you. Oh, man. Well, we get the original audio log from Ripley, which is kind of obviously a goodbye bit to just taken from Alien. The last survivor of Nostromo signing off. Yeah, I mean, how would you make this film in any way uplifting? You just couldn't. I think they were kind of stuck in this kind of like, which this film is not. It's not a feel good movie.
It's what I mean. It's the problems with this movie are just built in at ground level. But for me, there's two separate issues. There's the fact that everyone is a hateful rapist, and the fact that Newt is killed off right at the beginning, and therefore, so there are ways around killing Newt. They could have been separated somehow. Newt could have carried on safety, and Ripley could have ended up there. You could even have Newt still in suspension, still asleep, and you've got to protect Newt from the. But I appreciate that maybe that's a bit too much like Alien. So, but if you separate them so that Ripley doesn't have to carry that weight the whole movie of complete, misery, then that solves that problem. And there are ways to make those characters more fun and likable than they are. Maybe they take the high road and they're like, well, we're not going to have too much fun with a bunch of horrible rapists. But you can do it. You can have prisoners there who maybe they're victims of circumstance, or maybe they're deranged, or maybe they're there for crimes that are in the future, for corporate crimes. Maybe they're there because they were fighting the government. There's ways
to fraud or something like that.
There's ways to make them, or they could be freedom fighters. There's ways to make the characters more sympathetic and to make Ripley more upbeat. So why not do that? Because then you've solved all the movie's the movie's two main problems, to my mind.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, as I said throughout this, I mean, I never hated the film. I mean, I always kind of enjoyed it for its kind of its obvious elements of some good writing of dialogue. There's really good performances.
It's a really interesting film, and I'm really glad. I don't hate it at all. I wouldn't. I don't enjoy it.
It's just an interesting failure.
Exactly.
That doesn't make it unwatchable, but there's always that sense of because I've seen it so many times that the effect it has on you of being depressed afterwards or just downbeat is kind of all just worn off. So, but I think at the time there was that I can completely understand why people were just dead against it and just pissed off because of what they expected. It's all down to expectations, wasn't it? Of how would you continue on from Aliens and what that sort of gave you at the end. Oh my God, what's going to be the next chapter of these characters, and everything's just basically just flushed down the toilet and just and just gone, fuck you. We're just gonna go in hard and put Ripley in a horrible situation throughout the entire film, and then she dies. You're like, oh right, okay. Because if you came out and told people exactly what the film was in a very sort of short synopsis, you'd be like, I'm not going to watch that. You just end up being annoyed. And but I saw it at a kind of, I suppose, at the right age, and not having seen 1 and 2 to appreciate it for what it was. And I said I just love the story behind it all. I think that's the most fascinating thing. I just love crazy productions. I remember, when the box set came out, and it had this massive documentary on Alien 3. That was the first thing I watched on it. I didn't watch the other 2 or number 4 or watch the extended cut. I just went straight towards this documentary because I just wanted to know more about it. It's 3 hours long. You're like, fucking great, I remember when I was, I think very early on, I was sort of talking to, while I was interviewed for RoboDoc, but my interview got cut out because they changed the direction of it, which completely made sense. But I said to the guys, look, if they were going to do MGM, we're going to do a big box set on all the RoboCop films with like 3-hour documentaries for each one. Which one would you probably go to watch first? I think most of them were like RoboCop 3. You know what I mean? Because of its shambles of a film, right? That's where the interesting shit happens.
Yeah, very true.
Because in the day, you kind of like, generally the first one's always covered a lot, like especially with Aliens. So, but yeah, I mean, I still like it for what it is. I like the extended cut more than theatrical. I think there's still a compromise between the two. We can make a kind of more of a refined cut, maybe, but it's I'm sure some fans have done that. But yeah, even with all the scores as well. Number 3 is just so unique with its music and really elevates a lot of the film's problems.
Yeah, it would be really interesting to see an ultimate director's cut, which obviously can't exist because, as Fincher says, he never got to shot the material you'd need for it. But you could knock out the best part of an hour from the movie we've just watched, and it would still be feature length. It would still make sense conceptually and as a story. But I wonder how dense and energetic you could make it by just knocking out. You can lose a whole bunch of those characters. I wonder what that would look like.
Well, I'm sure there's fans have probably done that. It's like when people did fan edits of the Star Wars prequels and made them a lot better, by cutting out all the crap, because this was like a theatrical cut is 1 hour and 54 minutes, so this one's been extended by 30 minutes. So they cut out half an hour and changed a bit. So maybe you can get it down to probably an hour 45 without it being like too sort of that hacked to bits.
I would love to see a really stripped down, almost like a Terminator, like the first Terminator, something with that kind of vibe and that kind of intensity and that kind of pacing.
You could probably improve the ending with all the chasing through the corridors, cut those down and have them die a lot quicker.
Exactly.
Bang, 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 really quick.
There's so much you can cut. So much is repetition or redundant. That entire middle bit with them catching it and putting it in the thing and then it escaped. That's all that. Well, all that did go in the theatrical version. Yeah. None of that serves a purpose, really. I mean, we've got different views slightly on how effective that sequence is, but it's not necessary.
Yes. Yeah. I'd probably keep the Ox bit, maybe.
Yeah, the Ox bit is a great addition
because I just like the opening because it just really sets up Charles Dance.
I was pumped when I put this on. For the first, like I say, I don't think I'd ever seen this version before. I certainly have no memory of it. But yeah, after that, all that stuff out on the beach with Charles Dance at the beginning, I thought it was just fantastic. It looked so cool, and it really set the mood. And that carried on all the way through. I was with it all the way through. The Ox business was brilliant. I really much prefer that to the dogs. But then it just kind of, I don't know. It just doesn't progress to the next level somehow. It doesn't.
Well, yeah. I suppose it's down because this is an edit done by Charles de Lazarica and potentially with some other individuals. But maybe they maybe sort of fell in love with the pace of it, and maybe at certain areas where the pacing needs a bit more of a slice and dice kind of moment to speed things up.
It's a limited cast of very good actors, written well. It's great to luxuriate in those scenes, but it's not just that they're unlikable characters. There's some other fundamental thing I can't put my finger on. Whether it's that they feel a bit thin, it's a bit. It is all a bit thin. They're not. They seem like they've someone had the great idea for all these characters, and we'll flesh them out later, and then they just didn't really get around to that.
Maybe I should cut it myself.
Yeah, go on.
Maybe I should do an edit. Yeah, go on. There's something to do because I had been wanting to do my own edit of Superman 2, but I think this will be probably a little bit more fun and challenging to do. Yeah, maybe I'll do that.
Richard E. Grant in somewhere.
Yeah. Let's have him in the background. Just say a line. What the fuck are you on about? It's like demand some boots as he's getting chased. But yeah. Well, everyone, I hope you enjoyed the commentary. Me and Rob will be back with another Terminator commentary. So we're doing Terminator Salvation
Yay.
next, which I don't think you've seen for a long
No,
time.
another one I've not seen since back in the day when it came out.
Well, that's an interesting one, because I didn't like it that much when it came out. I thought it was the most forgettable film ever. And then, weirdly, over the years, as I've rewatched it more, I'm like, it's actually a pretty good film. There's a lot of good stuff in it. And I think it's a shame it didn't continue with that narrative and just, just made a fool of themselves with Terminator Genesis, which we'll then eventually get to. But yeah, well, everyone, take care of yourselves, and goodbye for now.